Heading to Leeds for
Get to Trade Point for a
1413
massive
LNER
20%
train.
off fashion, furniture, toilets, basins and baths. And if you loyalty discount, you'll get this on top. So, for big bathroom savings in-store and online, get to Trade Point. Enter March and subject to availability at tradepoint.co.uk.
Book direct at lner.co.uk. 51,200
choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey, y'all.
The Clash is getting ever closer. With wall-to-wall entertainment for all ages, this is more than just a game of rugby. Saturday the 18th of April, Bath take on old rivals Wasps as both teams make their push for the playoffs. With appearances from Rugby World Cup stars on each side, get ready for a day of high-octane action, both on and off the field. Tickets start from £20 for adults and £5 for kids. Book now at bathrugby.com/The Clash.
Discover Cork with Aer Lingus when you fly from London from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip. Experience this vibrant city and head to the coast for authentic Irish seafood and stunning scenery. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at aerlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
I'm Captain Obvious, and every day people book trips on Hotels.com that you will later hate like. A hate like is when you like Becky's picture of another waterfall even though you kind of hate it because she's there and you're on the train next to a mouth breather. Don't hate like Becky's trip. Book your own with Hotels.com. Hotels.com. Be there, do that.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
How do you make the most understated Range Rover even more striking? Paint it Santorini black, fit it with privacy glass, a full leather ebony interior, then place it on 21-inch gloss black alloy wheels. The Range Rover Velar R Dynamic Black, understated, has rarely been so bold. Limited numbers available for a limited price. Search Range Rover Velar, Land Rover, above and beyond.
virus case. State officials confirmed Georgia's first coronavirus infections in 2 residents. A group of 7 finance chiefs will hold a rare conference call today to discuss a response to the coronavirus spread. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak. Michael.
Thank you very much, John. In the NBA, the Knicks beat the Rockets. This is Bloomberg News 24 hours
Michael,
a day
thanks.
on air and on
Wall
Quick
Street
Take by
live from the
Bloomberg,
Bloomberg
powered by more
Interactive Broker
than
Studios.
2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. Michael Barr, this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak on this Super Tuesday. Let's get more on the voting on the
Good morning, Emily.
It was pretty extraordinary yesterday
race
to
with the
see
polls
that just beginning to open in a little less than an hour on the East Coast. Emily Wilkins joins us now, reporter for Bloomberg Government. Good morning, Emily. It was pretty extraordinary yesterday to see that wave of endorsements from the moderate wing of the Democratic Party sort of coalescing around Joe Biden. And I guess the question remains this morning of whether that support is going to translate into actual votes.
Oh, absolutely. That is what everyone here in Washington, D.C. and probably across the country is watching for. I will say, if you do check the polls this morning, it does seem like Bernie Sanders is still leading in a number of these states, particularly California, which has the most delegates of any state that's going up for elections today. But there is a lot of hope that with Buttigieg and Klobuchar backing Biden, that finally the moderate wing of the Democratic Party might be coalescing around their one candidate, and hoping that gives Biden some sort of an edge as we go into today.
Now, you look at the map, obviously. You mentioned California, where Bernie Sanders not only has that poll lead in, opinion surveys, but also remarkable ground game compared to Joe Biden. What is the former vice president's path today?
I think Biden's path, he was in Dallas last night. Don't forget that Texas is up today. That also has a very high number of delegates. And I think that he's also hoping in certain states, perhaps Minnesota, which was initially expected to go for Klobuchar, now might sort of change course and go to him. I think his momentum as well. Super Tuesday is obviously a very big deal. There are lots of states up. There are lots of delegates up. But let's not forget that even after today, you are going to see a large number of state competitions that have yet to happen. There's still going to be a lot of delegates on the table after today if Sanders does not come out with a clear majority of the delegates.
And we shouldn't forget that this is the first day, of course, that Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, is going to actually be on the ballot. He's sort of staked his strategy on getting started on the Super Tuesday states. What is the Bloomberg factor today?
Well, obviously, Michael Bloomberg has spent a lot of money in this race, way more than all the other candidates combined. And today we see if that pays off, if his strategy of blanketing the airwaves with campaigns eventually turns into more votes. We're going to be seeing exactly how he does in the polls, although at this point, in very preliminary polls, we don't see him winning any states at this point.
And obviously, he's spent a lot of money on advertising in this race and has indicated that even after today's voting, he's going to be in it to win it, in his words. But what kind of pressure is there on Bloomberg to perhaps coalesce around Biden when the former vice president has gotten so much of the support just yesterday?
I definitely think that there's a lot of pressure. You see moderates here in Washington, D.C. who are not just looking at the presidential, but looking at whether they can capture the Senate, whether they can hold on to the House. And the perceived wisdom is that it's going to be a lot easier to do that if there is a moderate candidate. And so the need for coalescing behind Joe Biden at this point is something that a lot of people see as critical, not just to winning the presidency in November, but to winning Congress as well.
And a lot of that moderate support, the endorsements we saw yesterday, are coming from superdelegates. How much of a factor could they play as this process goes forward, not just today and Super Tuesday, but beyond?
Well, remember that the DNC did change the rules this year, so superdelegates have a little bit of a different role. They're not going to be voting on that first ballot. So if Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden locks up enough delegates simply from the states alone, then they'll go in and superdelegates might not even play that big of a say. But if it is a contested election, if we see Biden do really strongly today and we see Sanders sort of continue his momentum as well, those superdelegates can play a big role on the second ballot and maybe ultimately decide who becomes the nominee.
A third of the delegates being handed out today. Emily Wilkins, reporter for Bloomberg Government. Thank you for the debrief this morning. And we should mention that Michael Bloomberg, who is competing today for Super Tuesday and the Democratic presidential nomination, is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP. That is the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. Ahead of the voting on Super Tuesday, ahead of the open on Wall Street, we are seeing gains, although they're paring some of their earlier pickup. The S&P futures are higher by 16 points right now. Dow futures up 178. NASDAQ futures a gain of 71 points. Stock 600 in Europe is higher by 2.4%. 10 years up, 630 seconds yield 1.14%. 2-year Treasury yield 0.86%. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stock futures point to more gains today on rising expectations of financial intervention to fight the spread of the coronavirus. Governments from Japan to the U.K. are preparing emergency measures or economic packages. Australia's central bank cut interest rates, and President Donald Trump said the Fed should follow suit. Yesterday, the Dow surged almost 1,300 points. The broader market was up 4.6%. Twitter says it's strongly encouraging all of its nearly 5,000 global employees to work from home because of virus concerns. Facebook followed Twitter in pulling out of this month's South by Southwest conference in Austin, Texas. And Adobe has canceled its Summit 2020 plan for Las Vegas, saying that instead it will hold the event online. The U.S. lab equipment maker Thermo Fisher Scientific has agreed to buy QIAGEN, a Dutch maker of tests for diseases including cancer and the coronavirus. The price tag is $10 billion. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. every day. Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. They don't just talk to the most important people.
Is it as ominous this time around?
They talk with the most interesting people.
Are they taking this seriously?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are rising this morning on the heels of a nearly 1,300-point gain for the Dow. Expectations are building for the Fed to cut interest rates at its next meeting, while questions surface about whether they'll move even sooner. Mark Matthews is managing director at Julius Baer.
I think the Fed would be reluctant to do an emergency cut because they don't want to look like they're slaves of the market. So I think a lot depends on the market itself. If it can regain some confidence and continue this rebound, in a way it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they can wait until March, and maybe in March they won't even need to cut.
Well, right now, traders are pricing in about 40 basis points of easing at the Fed's March 18th meeting, but some say a move may not be warranted. Chris Ailman is Chief Investment Officer for the California State Teachers Retirement System.
A 25 basis point cut in here doesn't do anything, and a 50 basis point cut, I'd almost be worried that would cause people to be almost really fearful that the U.S. economy is going to shut down. We have cases of this virus, but it is not extreme in the United States. We're not doing social distancing. The economy is going to slow. I wonder if 50 basis points almost looks like an overreaction where we are now.
Meantime, we await word from a meeting of G7 finance chiefs set to discuss a response to the coronavirus. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the details. Good morning, John.
And Karen, this meeting sparked hope for a coordinated rate cut from central banks, but that expectation could disappoint. According to Reuters, a statement from G7 finance ministers will remain silent on the topic of coordinated easing. Instead, G7 countries will reportedly pledge to work together to mitigate economic damage from the outbreak. A final statement expected today or tomorrow. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Well, John, we've already gotten a statement from the UK. Bank of England Governor Mark Carney is vowing to fight any economic fallout from the virus.
The bank will take all necessary steps to support the UK economy and financial system consistent with its statutory responsibilities.
Carney joins Jerome Powell, Christine Lagarde, and Haruhiko Kuroda in pledging to take action against economic damage from the coronavirus if needed.
And we have earnings from Target crossing the Bloomberg fourth quarter adjusted profit beating analyst estimates, that from continuing operations. And we'll be watching Target shares this morning. S&P futures are on the rise. They're up 18 points right now. Dow futures up 190. NASDAQ futures up 72. The DAX in Germany up 2.1%. 10-year Treasury up 6/30 seconds. The yield 1.14%. And the yield on the 2-year 0.86%. The euro 1.1107 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, thank you, Karen. 6:33 on Wall Street, and this news update is brought to you by Land Rover. The Only Adventure sales event is happening now until March 31st. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for details on the new Discovery Sport. Land Rover, above and beyond. Here's Michael Barr.
Nathan, thank you very much. The moderates in the Democratic Party are uniting ahead of the huge Super Tuesday contests. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg have dropped out of the race and have endorsed Joe Biden.
I'm looking for a president who will draw out what is best in each of us. And I'm encouraging everybody who is part of my campaign to join me because we have found that leader in Vice President, soon to be President, Joe Biden.
So still at the center of the Democratic Party, Biden and Mike Bloomberg, who will appear on his first ballots today. Michael Bloomberg is founder of Bloomberg LP, the parent of Bloomberg Radio. 14 states vote today. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And you can hear coverage of Super Tuesday right here on Bloomberg Radio starting at 7 p.m. Wall Street time. President Donald Trump met with drug company executives yesterday about the coronavirus. At the White House, executives with drug makers told Trump they were making rapid progress on vaccines to combat the coronavirus in the U.S., which has infected about 100 people in the country and killed 6. Later, the president spoke to rally supporters in Charlotte, North Carolina.
The United States is right now ranked by far number 1 in the world for preparedness.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he wants the Senate to pass a spending bill for the coronavirus to provide billions of dollars for the U.S. response.
I'm glad that our prospects for supplemental appropriations rest in the hands of a bipartisan group of negotiators. I would encourage my Democratic colleagues in both houses to let them do their work. It will be important to pass this first benchmark and supply these important funds within the next 2 weeks.
Governor Andrew Cuomo held a news conference in the wake of New York's first confirmed case of coronavirus. His message urged people to stay calm.
The woman who is now tested positive, she's at home. She's not even in a hospital. So the perspective here is important. And the facts, once you know the facts, once you know the reality, it is reassuring. And we should relax.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts, more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's 6:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update with John Stashower.
Nathan, Knicks and Rockets at the Garden. The Knicks were up by 21 in the second quarter. Houston rallied several times, got it down to 2. That was the Knick lead at the end.
Here we go. 4.6 to play. Knicks by 2 here at the Garden. Covington waiting to inbound. Faked it. Bounced it to Westbrook. 3 seconds. Westbrook at the right wing. 2 seconds. Pull up at the foul line. Missed off the front of the rim twice. Knicks win the ball game. 125-123. The Knicks winners over the Rockets, ending their 6-game losing streak. And what a game for R.J. Barrett, matching his rookie best with 27.
Knicks radio the call. They get just their 19th win of the year. Barrett led the way, but 7 Knicks, including 4 reserves, were in double figures. 4 Rockets scored at least 20. James Harden had 35. Among those watching in the stands, Leon Rose, the new Knick team president, former agent. His hiring now official. The hope is he can lure free agents to New York. He's expected to hire a new coach at season's end. Rose has close ties to both Jeff Van Gundy and Tom Thibodeau. They're seen as candidates for the job. Also, Miami upset Milwaukee by 16, and the NBA sent out a league-wide memo advising players, among other things, to fist bump rather than high five with fans in the wake of the coronavirus. College hoops, Duke blew out NC State, Baylor in overtime over Texas Tech. Rangers will host St. Louis tonight. Defending Stanley Cup champs come in, having won 7 straight. Yankees and Red Sox this afternoon in Tampa. Masahiro Tanaka will pitch. Noah Syndergaard for the Mets against Miami. There is golf to be played this summer at the Olympics in Tokyo, but Dustin Johnson says doesn't fit into his schedule. He won't play. With Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. 6:37 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
The U.S. is uniquely hamstrung on virus response. I'm Max Neeson, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Because of the peculiarities of America's healthcare system, the U.S. can't only replicate measures that have worked elsewhere to combat coronavirus. In areas where there appears to be community spread, it's time to consider school closures, event cancellations, and encouraging telecommuting. Such measures only succeed, however, if people stay home when ill or seek treatment if they have severe symptoms. Unfortunately, the U.S. healthcare system puts barriers in the way of doing the smart thing. Millions of Americans lack health insurance, and many more face high costs, and they may avoid seeking care as a result. On top of that, many American employers don't guarantee paid sick leave. What can the administration do? It can make tests more affordable by designating them as preventative services and it can also direct funds toward making sure that costs don't dissuade people from seeking help. The government should also encourage firms without paid leave to make an exception for the virus. These measures have to be instituted rapidly and widely publicized if they're going to work. These steps may contribute to further economic disruption. They're worth it to avert the human and financial costs of uncontrolled spread of this virus. I'm Max Neeson. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. It's coming up to 6:39 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Green Report. Here's Bob Moon.
Okay, millennial, when we baby boomers say summers aren't what they used to be, for once, we might be right. According to research from the Australia Institute think tank, summers on the continent are now a month longer than they were in the 1950s as climate change upends traditional weather patterns. The researchers found that between 1999 and 2018, Australian summers were 31 days longer than the mid-20th century average, with 23 fewer days of winter temperatures. The picture was even more dramatic in some regional centers, with the likes of Port Macquarie, a coastal holiday town about 4 hours drive north of Sydney, seeing 7 more weeks of summer. While longer summers and shorter winters may sound like bliss, that is so superficial. In a land already coping with climatic extremes, longer summers also increase the risk of extreme heat, which is of particular danger to the young and elderly. So no, that is not okay with many boomers. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Okay, Bob, thank you. You're coming up to 6:40 on Wall Street. As the coronavirus spreads, Visa has become the latest payments firm to face a hit from the fallout. Here with that story is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The company warned that cardholders spending overseas has slowed sharply, especially for travel-related purchases, and this quarter's revenue growth will be about 2.5 to 3.5 percentage points lower than the outlook it shared on January 30th. Visa said it would not give a forecast for future quarters until its earnings call in April. Visa joins MasterCard and PayPal Holdings in warning investors about how the spread of coronavirus might impact their business. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. S&P futures are higher by almost 14 points. Dow futures up 166. NASDAQ futures a gain of 58 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
This is Bloomberg Pursuit's look at luxury. The markets may be in flux, but at least one alternative asset seems to be holding strong. Blue chip artwork. A Mark Rothko painting from the estate of late financier Donald Marin sold for about $70 million. According to people familiar with the private transaction, 3 New York galleries, Pace, Gagosian, and Aquavella, recently announced they joined forces to sell the former Museum of Modern Art trustees' trove. About $300 million worth has been placed so far, led by a pair of Picasso portraits sold to casino mogul Steve Wynn. Sports investors also doing well. Owners of the Los Angeles Football Club have partially bought out a stake held by Malaysian businessman Vincent Tan in a deal that values the club at more than $700 million, the most ever for a Major League Soccer team. The LAFC deal continues a rapid uptick in team valuations for MLS, which starts its 25th season this weekend. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
Connecting decision makers to a network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
2 people confirmed dead after tornadoes swirl around central Tennessee overnight, including Nashville. 40 buildings flattened around the city with downed trees and snapped power lines. Rachel Hubart says it was scary.
We went out into the hallway, and it was pretty scary out there, too. Apparently a couple apartments down, there had been a tree that had blown through the apartment and hit a couple of people in there, so it was pretty scary. He was gushing blood, and we were just trying to call 911 as fast as we could, but nothing was going through.
A reported gas leak caused the Germantown community of Nashville to be evacuated. It's Super Tuesday with primary elections in 14 states about to get underway. National attention focused on the race for the Democratic presidential nomination, but there are local primaries as well. In Alabama, former Attorney General and Senator Jeff Sessions faces a slate of opponents in the GOP primary for his old seat. New Hampshire becomes the 11th U.S. state to report a coronavirus infection. Stock futures are higher after yesterday's Wall Street comeback. I'm Michael Toscano.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
Is that good for American finance?
What is happening with the headcount?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 6:47 on Wall Street, and futures are jumping this morning along with NYMEX crude oil. We go to the first word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures are climbing right now with Dow futures up 152 points. S&P's gained 13, while NASDAQ futures rise by 62. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.14%, and Shanghai rose 0.7% overnight. While European markets are also trading higher, led by 2% gains in Spain. Back in the U.S. on the economic front, U.S. February auto sales. After the bell last night, Tilray Q4 revenue missed the lowest estimate. Shares are down 11% in the pre-market, and Visa saw Q2 net revenue growth lower due to the virus. Regarding earnings this morning, target full-year adjusted EPS forecast midpoint missed estimates, and look for Kohl's to report around 7 a.m. Wrapping things up, UPS was raised to buy at Deutsche Bank, American Express raised to buy at DZ Bank, Tesla was raised to market perform at JMP with a price target of $1,060, and AMD raised to overweight over at Piper. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, at least 6 deaths have been reported because of the coronavirus in the U.S. Bloomberg's John Tucker has more in this live report.
Michael, all 6 deaths reported in the U.S. so far have been near Seattle. Leaders there will use emergency authority to buy a motel to quarantine what could be scores of patients. State of Massachusetts health authorities said a woman in her 20s is thought to be that state's second coronavirus case. And state officials confirmed Georgia's first coronavirus infections in 2 residents there. Meantime, group of 7 finance chiefs are holding a rare conference call today to discuss a response to the coronavirus spread. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak. Michael.
John, thank you, sir. It is Super Tuesday when voters in 14 states are casting ballots for Democratic presidential candidates. You can hear coverage of that right here on Bloomberg starting at 7 p.m. Wall Street time. Former Vice President Joe Biden has the endorsements from Pete Buttigieg, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rourke, who all recently dropped out of the race. The NBA has told players to avoid high-fiving fans and strangers and avoid taking any items for autographs as the league responds to the coronavirus. As for play on the court, the Knicks beat the Rockets in an upset. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios where it's just before 6:50 on Wall Street. Time now to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in our nation's capital include President Trump getting an update on coronavirus efforts today at the National Institutes of Health's Vaccine Research Center. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin appears before the House Ways and Means Committee as hearings on the White House budget request continue on Capitol Hill. And the Trump administration is ordering 4 Chinese news outlets to cut staff in the U.S. That's after China expelled 3 Wall Street Journal reporters last month. Also making news, of course, Super Tuesday. Democratic voters heading to the polls in more than a dozen states and territories. Bloomberg U.S. politics editor Kathleen Hunter joins me now ahead of the first balloting beginning in just about 10 minutes on the East Coast. Good morning, Kate. I guess we'll see pretty soon whether the wave of momentum that Joe Biden has gotten, not just from the South Carolina primary, but from all those endorsements yesterday, pans out for him.
Absolutely. And I think, to put it mildly, those endorsements and that wave of momentum that you described couldn't have come at a better moment for Joe Biden. It was kind of in some ways potentially the last moment. He had a huge win in South Carolina over the weekend, which he definitely needed and had promised, that he would deliver and did deliver it. And then, coming off of that, having, 2 of the other big centrists in the race, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar drop out, not only drop out, but throw their support behind him along with Beto O'Rourke, definitely will help Biden going into Super Tuesday. Beto is obviously from a state, Texas, that is one of the big ones that's on the ballot today, or that's voting today. So that'll be interesting. That'll be an interesting dynamic to watch. But I think that the question is whether Biden can translate that momentum in terms of the South Carolina win and the endorsements that he's won into votes in the 14 states that are balloting today.
Yeah, and not just that, but as we've been observing for the last couple of weeks here, California, the biggest prize today, is showing, at least in opinion polls, a pretty strong lead for Bernie Sanders. I mean, there could still be a possibility that by the time Super Tuesday voting is done tonight, we could have still a muddled, potentially, 2-person race here.
Absolutely. I think that's a very, very distinct possibility. And I think that, it's important to remember, that, not to take this metaphor too far, but that the wave of momentum that Joe Biden has is existing kind of separately from, the arguably bigger wave of momentum that Bernie Sanders has built up in, Nevada and some of the earlier voting states. And so I think that you raise a very good point when it comes to California. If some of these bigger states end up, really firmly backing Sanders today, I think it could be a very short-lived revival for Joe Biden. That being said, there's also Michael Bloomberg is in the race. This is going to be the first time voters are weighing in on him, on his candidacy. So that's another potential potential spoiler out there that we all have to see how that plays out in terms of where the votes come down.
Yeah, let's get a little bit more into what potential spoiler role the former New York City mayor could play today. He's spent, of course, as we've been mentioning, more than $500 million on advertising across platforms across the country. He's been racking up a lot of endorsements himself, particularly from city mayors. So what kind of role could Bloomberg play today?
Well, I think there's certainly the potential, and this would be what I would be watching most closely, is the degree to which Bloomberg, as a more centrist candidate, fills the role that Buttigieg and Klobuchar had been filling to an extent, which is peeling votes away from Joe Biden. And so you could end up in a situation where we end up seeing a mixed result with Bernie Sanders essentially, consolidating the progressive vote within a lot of these states, particularly states like California that tend to be more liberal, while you have, Joe Biden and Michael Bloomberg kind of splitting the vote when it comes to the centrists. And so that could end up, again, benefiting Bernie Sanders, but we have to wait and see how that all plans out.
And as all this has been unfolding, President Trump has been trying to play his own role in the Democratic primary, tweeting out messages, holding rallies in the states that are holding voting. I mean, what does this potential muddied field mean for the president?
Well, I think that it shows that the president is trying to use his incumbency to his benefit. There is this divisiveness right now within the Democratic Party that, kind of has the effect of potentially slowing down the, process of everybody getting behind who the eventual nominee is. And I think, from a purely, nakedly political standpoint, it makes sense in some ways for Trump to try to continue to gin up that, whatever acrimony is there, because it benefits him in the general election. So I think we're seeing some of that. I think, also there's been some talk about getting Republicans in some of these states who are some of these states that hold open primaries where not just Democrats are able to vote, but Republicans and independents as well, getting Republicans to come out and potentially support one candidate or another as a way to try to throw off the results. So that's something that we could also see some reporting on after the fact.
And as we head toward the Super Tuesday voting, we should mention that Michael Bloomberg, a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination, is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. Let's move on to President Trump's response to the coronavirus, because there is a political element to that as well in terms of what this outbreak could do to the economy, a message that the president has been trying to hammer out as the reason he should be reelected. What are the politics of this spreading outbreak?
Well, I think we've seen on a number of different fronts within the last 24 to 36 hours, the Trump administration really trying to counteract, whatever political fallout there might be from the, uncertainty at this point, but potential, downslide of the economy resulting from the virus. One of the ways in which we've seen that is, the president hammering again on the idea that the Fed needs to be lowering rates. That's something that he has, broken ranks with past presidents in terms of coming out and sort of meddling in Fed policy and making public statements about that. We've seen him, re-up those calls in the past day or so. And I think in part that's meant to essentially deflect any blame as much as he can for any kind of economic downturn to the Fed rather than, to the White House's economic policies.
Is there a sense that kind of hammering of the Fed that the president has done pretty much from the get-go of his presidency, is there any sense that resonates with his base?
I mean, I think that it's important to remember that, I think in a small sliver of his base, the very libertarian portion of the base, has always been very critical of the Fed, going back to Rand Paul and Ron Paul, who wanted to audit the Fed. Those were big, components of their, agenda. And so I think that there is a small but significant and devoted portion of Trump's base that this will resonate with. Yes.
All right, Bloomberg U.S. Politics Editor Kathleen Hunter, thank you as always for the update. Read more about all these stories on Bloomberg.com or on the Bloomberg Terminal. Tune into our special Super Tuesday coverage. It begins at 7 p.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. We continue to watch shares of Target this morning. They are now down 1.7% in early trading as trading of the shares picks up. Target did give a lukewarm outlook for its profit this year, a sign the retail giant sees some challenges mounting as uncertainty reigns about the impact of the coronavirus outbreak. Futures again are higher with S&P futures up 10 points right now. Dow futures up 132 and NASDAQ futures up 56. 10-year Treasury up 8/32. Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz straight ahead. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Here in Australia, we have had the first community transmissions in New South Wales as well. So really looking at the response here. Let's take a look at how all of this is playing out for the investment community. Evans and Partners. Lucy Mayer joins us now. She's an investment advisor there. It's really problematic, I think, for economists at the moment in terms of just throwing out their growth forecasts, right? A lot of it depending on how bad this gets and what kind of reaction you get that affects growth. So as an investor, you look at a rally like we've seen on the basis of kind of expectations of coordinated central bank action. Is there a risk that we're going to see another leg lower?
Thanks, Heidi. Well, certainly with that rally that we did see overnight is certainly welcome, and we're starting to see that in the Asian markets. However, it's probably too early to say that it's any sort of meaningful recovery, and we do expect further volatility to come. And that's as to date, the market response has been purely based on sentiment, and just not before the weekend, we just started to see those first hard data points that really give us some indication of the real economic impact of the coronavirus. So that, of course, we saw the Chinese PMI come in at record lows, and also overnight was the US ISM, which also disappointed expectations.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Business is like a puzzle.
Can you make a call given the data?
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
The good news is the economy is strong. The bad news is the economy is strong.
Financial crises take a really long time to recover from.
Finance.
The strong job market's pulling people back in.
You can't have for very long, monetary union without a fiscal union.
Investment.
What we preach is extreme diversification.
It's hard to have sustained productivity without capital investment.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City, for our audience worldwide, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, stocks snapping back, adding to Monday's big gains with big hopes for stimulus. G7 officials preparing to respond. And on this Super Tuesday, the Democratic field narrowing down. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, here is your price action this Tuesday morning. Equity futures are positive by 13 on the S&P 500, up by 0.4%, following the biggest day of gains since December 2018. In the bond market, a bid once more. Yields down by 2 basis points to 1.14% on 10s. On 2s, 87 basis points and down 3 basis points on the day. And in foreign exchange, Tom Keene, the euro just slightly negative, down 0.1% as that call with G7 finance chief convenes.
It's going to convene, and we're going to get headlines from it. We have Chris Verone coming up, who's absolutely phenomenal on trend-based analysis. He's very optimistic in the sense of a liquidity wave. We'll talk about that in a moment. But, John, I want to take over from the politics here to finance and investment. This is from Mike Allen moments ago. He speaks to a 23-year-old, okay, someone deep with resonance and experience in the world of politics. Really, it's just about changing the zeitgeist of American politics. And it's almost as the G7 right now wants to change the zeitgeist of the virus and the tangible effect on economic growth.
So what do we need from the G7 call today? They will be releasing a statement a little bit later.
Is this going to cut it? We're watching the risks, we're ready to act, or do we need to see concrete steps on fiscal and on monetary policy in that statement?
Do we need them today? Maria Tadeo, we spoke to out of Brussels, was leaning towards you may not get concrete steps. To me, that's a big disappointment for this market if there's not a to-do list at least, or action in terms of initial rate cuts.
Hoping to get that statement in the next hour or so, but Lisa Reuters reporting several hours again that maybe we won't get those concrete steps on fiscal and on monetary policy.
My favorite quote of the morning, one of the best performing macro hedge fund managers came out in a Bloomberg story saying this could become a textbook bull trap. The market rallies, you think it's over, mommy and daddy are going to intervene. He was talking about the central banks. If this doesn't really play out, it's game over. And that is really the key question, is what is the threshold for it not being game over right now?
This is what Kit Duke said as well in his morning. No, I worry that the best of the sentiment reaction will come from anticipation of a monetary policy move, and euphoria will fade once that has been enacted and we return to watching the virus's global spread.
Peter Bookvar, Bleakley Advisory, just launching a note, and he calls it shooting blanks, with just the basic idea that, we got to get there, and, we'll know, I guess, within an hour or so.
Don't you worry, Tom, that the policy response seems to be shaped by the market action of the last 5 minutes? These guys met 2 weeks ago at the G20. Over in Riyadh and did nothing. They should have been preparing for this weeks ago.
I don't even know what the schedule is right now in terms of us talking to world-class virologists, if we try to do every day here at Surveillance. But I'm going to say this, and I think it's really important. The single headline I saw today was a triple subhead, not on Super Tuesday in the Washington Post, but on the virus. And I believe they said 15 of the great 50 states of this nation have the virus. To me, that's more into what G7 is doing than Fed dynamics and that. The virus spreads.
Well, let's get the call from the street, shall we, and bring in David Kelly, JP Morgan Asset Management Chief Global Strategist. David, fantastic to have you with us on the phone. Just walk me through what you want to hear, what you want to see in that statement as that call starts between G7 finance chiefs and central bankers.
Well, I think there needs to be an air of calm. I don't want to see immediate action, actually. I think that the Fed meets on March 17th, 18th. I think that would be a good time to put in a rate cut. The problem is if you put in the rate cut right now, and then people will say, well, what's next? And so you could quickly head down to zero, and the Federal Reserve is really the only central bank with the capability of providing major rate cuts. And any rate cuts won't really help the economy. I mean, that should be clear. What rate cuts do is they validate the drop in long-term interest rates, and those very low long-term interest rates, 1.10 on a 10-year Treasury, make it very difficult for people to avoid stocks. And so what I think lower rates really do is they put a floor under global stocks. So I think they should do it, but I think they should take their time because we're only in the early chapters of what this virus could mean for the global economy.
John, we've gone almost bear market, negative 17% or so at the worst, and we're back up to a correction level. I mean, we're not supposed to be hysterical at a correction level.
Yeah, the question I heard a lot over the last 24 hours is whether you should reach for the post-Q4 2018 playbook and whether you just ride this rally now. I think, Tom, things are very different compared to what they were 18 months ago.
Let's ask David Kelly. I mean, what's the compare and contrast here? If it's not Q4 2018, what are you comparing this to, Dr. Kelly?
Well, of course, the whole point is that there isn't an easy playbook. If there was an easy playbook, the uncertainty wouldn't be as great and the markets would bounce back faster. I think, it's one of those cases where you've got to think, well, what do we know and what don't we know? There's a lot we don't know. We don't know how far this virus is going to spread. We don't know how many people this virus is sadly going to kill. What we do know is it's not going to last forever. I mean, this is not a multi-year event. It will take a while to get a vaccine up and running, but I'm sure that they will get that done. So 12 to 18 months down the road, we're going to be talking about the recovery from whatever this was. And I think for long-term investors, then what you have to think about is, well, what do I own that can ride out the storm? This is when good balance sheets matter. What do I own that can ride out the storm and can benefit from a rebound? So I think people need to take a long-term view on this. But, the whole point is this could get very bad for the global economy because this virus is just lethal enough for everybody to pay attention and for it to slow down the global economy and cause social distancing and so forth. And then it seems to be contagious enough that it could become very widespread, but we really still have some questions of that. So there's tough times ahead. I mean, I think the way to think about this is 2020 was going to be the year of the election. That script is gone. 2020 is the year of the virus. But if you're an investor, you should be investing not just for 2020, but also 2021, 2022, and so forth. So you've got to take a long-term view. We don't know how deep it will be, but we do kind of know how long it will last.
So, David, if you want to take a long view and you don't think that rate cuts are really going to do that much in the short term, What are you doing in terms of selling into the brief rally, or sort of how are you trying to take advantage of the big swings one direction or another that seem to be driven by sentiment right now?
Well, of course, our portfolio managers are working very hard on this at a micro level. I mean, I think for long-term investors, the sort of advice I'd give is the question is not when. Do not try and get the timing that's right. The question is what. Do you have a portfolio that is appropriate for where you are in life, and are you overinvested in stuff that's just too expensive? So I think this is a time to be somewhat conservative. Make sure that you're owning companies with good balance sheets, with good cash flow, with an ability to wide out what could be, a pretty rough year.
What are you doing to adjust your economic growth numbers? I mean, let's get out front of Bruce Kasman and your acclaimed weekly prospects Friday afternoon. David Kelly, what are you doing in terms of the economic call wrapped around this G7 meeting?
It's very tricky. I mean, the problem is that traditional macroeconomic models are not going to give you the answer here. In fact, it's also, if this turns into a recession, it's a very unusual recession because this one will be centered now, I think, in the service sector. I know global manufacturing just hit its worst number since May of 2009 in the global PMIs yesterday, but actually the real risk is in global services, and we haven't seen that. So we just don't know. If you take entertainment, hotels, airlines, travel, you add all that together, how much of a drag does that put on the economy? It's very hard to model this. So we're feeling in the dark a little bit here. I think we may try and look at this more from an employment perspective rather than a demand perspective, because the usual models of pent-up demand, cyclical goods, that's not going to drive these economic models. So we're going to have to think a little bit more about what it really means for the employment decision by companies, particularly companies in the service sectors, and it'll take us a little while to get a handle on that.
Well, David, this is really important then, because we can put together some policies that help these companies through this rough part of the economy through the early part of 2020. What would you like to see from policymakers with that in mind?
Well, yeah, I think certainly some significant help from the Small Business Administration. I mean, there are some companies, of course, who are over-levered for bad reasons. And you don't want to sort of have a moral hazard issue here. But I think there are a lot of smaller companies, particularly in those tourism, travel, entertainment, leisure sectors, who are going to be really strapped for cash flow. And I think anything the government can do to extend low-interest loans, maybe give them some sort of tax break, something to help small businesses and entertainment, leisure industry businesses to keep them all afloat through 2020 will be a very good thing, and also things to perhaps help companies keep people employed and just don't lay off all workers just because business is slowing down. So you've got to try and focus on that point too.
This, David, is actually where I have a little bit of faith in the ECB. There's been so much talk in markets that they don't have any bullets left, they can't cut rates, they can't do more QE. I actually think they already have the tools in place to do some targeted lending, don't they?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. And I think there aren't many things that we can do on a macro level to try and help things out, because this is not something, again, if you have a problem which is in the cyclical sector and things like housing, you cut mortgage rates, people want to buy houses. Cutting mortgage rates is not going to make you want to go to the theater. And so that's a problem. But I think, yes, small business lending, cheaper lending, but also I think you may need something on the fiscal side so that we're not encouraging banks just to lose money on this. We're going to have some way of remunerating lenders or otherwise getting money to small businesses to make them, help them ride this out.
David Kelly, thank you so much.
Thanks, David.
Greatly appreciate it this morning. Good brief there. And, of course, across their wide platform, I'm sure there'll be some, not only summation of opinion, but also nuances and differences from John Norman to Bruce Kasman and the rest.
This is key here, Tom. I don't know what the scope or severity of this health crisis is going to be. I think we can all get our hands around the idea that by the time we get to the middle of the year and go into the back half, a lot of this will have passed. What you want to see is a set of policies that put us on a path to a much smoother, quicker recovery. And that's why the policy tools that these guys tailor, put together in the coming weeks, are just so critical.
There's also an irony here. If they are successful, what does that mean for the long end of the curve, for bonds that people are hiding out in, right? And that's sort of the question as well as we head toward potentially particularly volatile week.
A lot more on the markets coming up. Let's get over to Michael Barr, shall we, for your news, your headlines worldwide. Here is Michael. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Tom. Today is Super Tuesday. A total of 14 states will hold contests that could shape the Democratic presidential race. Coverage of Super Tuesday begins at 7 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg. It comes as former Vice President Joe Biden is getting a major boost just hours before the biggest contest of the primary season with Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. They are both dropping out of the race for president and endorsing Biden. The former vice president thanked Klobuchar and Buttigieg.
There hasn't been a harsh word between us since we started to compete. And I think that it's clear to everyone that this is a man who is not only brilliant, but is decent.
Biden also received the endorsement from former presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke. At least 6 people are dead and dozens of buildings damaged after a confirmed tornado touched down in Nashville this morning. There are reports of roofs ripped off buildings along with power outages and scattered debris. And keep in mind, Tennessee is a Super Tuesday state. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there are 102 cases of the coronavirus in the United States. 6 people have died. During a North Carolina rally, President Trump touted his response to the virus.
We've made a lot of progress. We've really done a great job with it. We're keeping our borders strong. My job is to protect the health of American patients and Americans first, and that's what we're doing.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Lisa, Tom.
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. That was the news. Let's get you some price action this Tuesday morning. Things improving big time in yesterday's session. The follow-through is quite decent too. We're positive. We're up 0.7% on the S&P 500. The session still young. The focus, a call of G7 finance ministers and central bank chiefs. At the moment, the bond market's still bid. Yields down 2 basis points on 10s, down 2 on 2s. We are at 88 basis points on a 2-year yield. From New York, this is Bloomberg Radio.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Now, after a heavy losing streak last week, U.S. stocks surged on hopes that central banks across the world will take measures to offset any impacts of the coronavirus. We also had emerging market stocks now gaining the most since mid-February. Joining us now is Conrad Saldana, portfolio manager for the global equity team at Neuberger Berman. Thank you so much for joining us today. Of course, we have seen this massive rally on expectations that perhaps there will be some sort of coordinated action by central banks. I think when it comes to developed markets, central banks don't seem to have that much room. How do emerging markets compare?
Sherry, that's a good question. I think emerging markets, when you look at inflation, is fairly subdued. There's real rates in several countries in emerging markets. I will admit up front that growth is anemic globally. But when you look at from a policy standpoint, at least on the monetary side, you've got a fair bit of room in emerging markets to stimulate. There is a certain amount of fiscal as well that they can resort to. Obviously, they're going to keep an eye on their currencies to make sure there's no significant slippage here. But I think that's a fair point that if you look for stimulus, it's going to come from emerging markets. They've got more room and bandwidth. And I think that's going to focus much, much more on the domestic side of the economies and try to bring back demand and stimulate demand.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, 7:17 on Wall Street. And Bloomberg Daybreak is out on customer terminals, bringing you all the news you need to start your day. Let's get a check of the latest headlines with Hannah George at the Bloomberg Daybreak desk. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Karen. The G7 meeting may disappoint investors. According to Reuters, a statement drafted for the conference call doesn't push for fiscal spending or coordinated rate cuts. Still, central banks in Asia are taking action. Australia and Malaysia each cut their main rates by 25 basis points. Meantime, ECB President Christine Lagarde pledged appropriate and targeted measures. On the politics front, Joe Biden's getting a boost ahead of Super Tuesday. He picked up endorsements from Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke. And in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu is claiming victory in the election. With about 90% of votes counted, his Likud alliance has 59 of 120 seats in parliament. For all the news you need to start your day, check out Daybreak on your mobile phone on the Bloomberg Anywhere app. Karen.
All right, Hannah, thank you. S&P futures higher up about 21 points. Dow futures up 250. NASDAQ futures up 90. The DAX in Germany's up 2.6%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 1.15%. The yield on the 2-year 0.89%. NYMEX crude oil is up 3%, up $1.43 to $48.18 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.6% or $9 to $16.0370 an ounce. The euro 1.1118 against the dollar. The yen at 107.97. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much. 5 things you need to know. We thank Interactive Brokers for their support of all that we do here. Lisa Bramwitz, John Farrow, and Tom Keene, thank you for being with us. The future's up 21, a little bit of an ebb there, maybe off what Reuters is saying on G7. Right now, just on the virus as well, I mentioned this earlier, and you guys dive in here. To me, the single headline is 15 states out of 50, 15 out of 50, 50, seem to be in some evidence of this virus. By no means is this thing slowing down.
For me right now, focused on the policy response. Overnight we had rate cuts from Malaysia, the RBA, likely to get rate cuts from elsewhere too as we hold this G7 call. No, I think it was largely expected, especially for Australia, but starting to see the action in a way that we didn't last week, seeing the capitulation, and I think we've seen the resolve of these guys totally break because of what's happened in markets over the last week.
And in corporations as well, in businesses. I mean, Guy Johnson's in Brussels talking to all the airline guys, and you can see they're in shock.
But this is where we need support, Tom.
Operational shock.
Tom, this is where we need support for some of these companies that in normal times would be otherwise very viable, decent and resilient. What we have right now is a very temporary, severe shock to economic activity. When we come out the other side, you want to see these businesses able to recover. What we don't want to see is a series of companies need to pull the labour market lever, lay people off just to get through to the middle of the year. It's important to take a step back, thinking about what kind of policies do we need to see in the next couple of months to get to the middle of the year on a firmer footing, so when this health scare passes, this economy can recover as best as possible.
So talking company specific, Apple with shares rising, the market cap increased the most on record, $111 billion yesterday, just one day gain alone. Just to give you a sense, the Foxconn, or Hanhai, came out and said that they expect to return to normal with production in the next coming weeks by the end of March. This doesn't totally cohere with Tim Cook's statements that they were close to it already, but it gives you a sense of the timeline, and it's sort of that clarity, which makes me wonder what's being priced into the market right now, given how big of a sell-off we've had.
Focus on the Fed, and can we make it to March 18th? Can we actually make it to March 18th without doing anything? Because the amount of calls I've seen, Goldman out with a 50 basis point rate call, Tom, and a conversation about it coming perhaps even sooner than the actual scheduled meeting.
There's two dynamics here. You're absolutely right about just getting to the meeting, and that's its own parlor game. But the other one, for our audience on radio and television that's not tuned in to the zeitgeist that we have funneling into us from Bloomberg and every other source, the massive shift today is from 1, 2 out to 3, and many people suggesting and framing out 4 rate cuts.
I've seen those calls. Maybe you get 50 basis points up front, you get another 50 by the second half of the year. A lot of people coalescing around that idea. For me, I'm looking at the markets right now. What is the market looking for? And quite clearly, the front end of pretty much every single major bond market is still very bid compared to where it was a month ago.
Well, looking at Fed funds futures, the market is completely pricing in a rate cut in the March meeting. Frankly, almost 2 rate cuts at the March meeting and almost 4 by the end of the year. Look, my question is, what data are they looking at? The Fed keeps saying we're data dependent, but we aren't getting clear data that shows any of the impact.
They got to get out front of the 2 mandates. One is disinflation and the other is the economy
to
as
be clear, for the Fed, what they've set as a threshold is a material reassessment of the outlook. And I think they can sit there and say we've just had a material reassessment of the outlook and it doesn't look good.
I want to bring up something that nobody's talking about, and I really thank our great world-class headlines on the Bloomberg terminal. There was that one headline, just boom, there it was, no big deal. The CEO of Air France saying they're in pretty good shape. They've got a huge government ownership, but so many others don't. And as the outcome of this virus, what Catherine Mann at Citigroup has always talked about, which is a consolidation, just a mass consolidation out there, opportunistic and also almost needed.
Yeah, maybe just to survive at this point. Ryanair stock on the year is down by about 18%. I believe the drop over the last couple of months, the last 6 weeks, has been even more severe than that.
Explain to our American audience who Ryanair is. Is that the one you stand up on?
I think many of our audience are familiar with a budget airline.
Yeah, that's Coventry to Birmingham, right?
Not sure they do that particular route. It's interesting listening to the conversation with Guy Johnson, good friend and colleague of ours, speaking to Michael O'Leary, the chief over at Ryanair. And what he had to say was there's no point cutting price in this environment. That's not going to do anything about demand. So just think about that. Demand is not going to respond to price in this environment, which takes us to this rate cut story. What is that going to do for demand in this environment? And the argument is not a whole lot.
And Willie Walsh with British Air, of course, IAG guy was talking to. I just want to know if they're going to keep flying the Boeing 747, but that's not what the theme was about.
There's also all of the peripheral businesses like GoGo, Global Eagle Entertainment, all of the networks sort of around the airlines. And it's not just the airlines. I mean, I'm looking at debt markets. It's gaming. It's it's MGM. You're looking at the bonds of all of these companies. Absolutely.
Give us a scale of that. How much are they off?
It depends. I mean, some of them, the yields have surged, by 10 percentage points in some cases, the most extreme cases. The question is, particularly in the oil patch, the question is, John, to your point, what kind of policy response will there be to keep these companies going? And do you want to? Or are these some of the weaker links that probably would have run into trouble anyway?
Can we talk about something? This is really important. This comes from Wikipedia, which is a really updated source here, where FDA has said to Perel, and is it Gojo, as you mentioned, Lisa? They have to stop its claims that the product is effective, whatever it is, at eliminating diseases. It's 70% ethanol. I mean, it's everywhere now. And for folks in New York City, you can't go anywhere. Well, I mean, Vet Bill's got a thing of Purell.
Did you see anecdotally someone paid $50 for a thing of Purell? I think in London there was a shortage.
They used dollars, did they? Over in London, things got that bad, they've ditched sterling and they've started using dollars to buy Purell.
Fair enough.
And this thing has been bounced around. It's gone to Pfizer, it's gone to J&J, it's gone back to Gojo, whatever it's called. I mean, what is it? And the answer is it's like solid alcohol, right?
If it's solid alcohol, you're in good shape. It has to be at least 60% alcohol, they say. That's what they say.
Well, that's like the Irish beer that John drinks,
Are we going to take hygiene lessons for Tom about how to wash your hands? Don't use Purell. You saying use bar soap?
We had a big lecture last night. This is tough on radio. We had a big lecture last night about how to wash your hands at the table.
We are here for you on the markets.
I said use soap.
And not for your medical needs. Equity futures are doing better. They're up 0.7%, positive 20 points from New York. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
The Clash is getting ever closer. With wall-to-wall entertainment for all ages, this is more than just a game of rugby. Saturday the 18th of April, Bath take on old rivals Wasps as both teams make their push for the playoffs. With appearances from Rugby World Cup stars on each side, get ready for a day of high-octane action, both on and off the field. Tickets start from £20 for adults and £5 for kids. Book now at bathrugby.com/The Clash.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We are live on Bloomberg Radio as the G7 finance chiefs and central bankers get together for a telephone call. We're waiting for the outcome and the statement. Ahead of that, equity futures are positive by 0.8% on the S&P, up 24 points. In foreign exchange, the euro slightly negative, bucking a trend of the last couple of weeks. The euro coming in 0.2%. And a big bond market bid of yesterday morning faded into the close yesterday. This morning, unchanged now, 116, Thomas, your yield on a 10-year.
I could just see the finance minister of Japan. You're the fourth person in your call.
Seriously.
You wonder, how do they do a conference call with all these guys?
What are they going to do? with the Japanese bond
They're
market?
going to do it. Come on, this is no different, and I in no means would equate this virus to the plague. It's like Albert Camus' The Plague. You know what? They've got a message they've got to convey with serious intent.
Yeah, I think they can be the circuit breaker for confidence. I think that's important,
exactly.
Tom. And maybe that's the story of the last couple of days.
I would totally agree that it's got to be the confidence. Just because of time, I want to get right to our guest here. This is the interview of the day, without question, on the markets. Christopher Verone does something, folks, I'm a big believer in, is he refuses to catch the knife in the dark. That's called stochastic analysis. He and I share an affection for not doing stochastic analysis, John, which means you've got to find the trend. John, have you seen the trend in the last 48 hours? Is it out there somewhere?
The last 48 hours, the trend looks a little bit better than what it looked like maybe a week ago. Are you comfortable with this? Chris Verone, strategic partner and head of technical and macro strategy, joins us now. How comfortable are you with the rally?
Well, these moves are never meant to be comfortable. Let's get that on the record here. And I think when you go back and you look historically at how markets bottom, it's a process and there's drama involved and it's never easy. Went back and we looked at the 98 low, the 2011 low, and the 2016 low. That initial decline, that bang, as we call it, always got you within about 80% of what was ultimately the final low. So, let's go back to the low last week, somewhere around 28.25, 28.50. I would feel pretty good in saying I would guess we're within 80 or 90% of what will be the final low of this move. But I don't want to get too cute. You have price extremes and you have sentiment extremes. While this may be a process, I think we're close enough where the conditions for a tradable low are certainly in place.
So talk to me about the sentiment extremes. When you look at the options market right now, have we washed things out? What does that look like at the moment?
Yeah, that is the one place where I think the signals are probably most compelling here. We had one of the biggest backwardations in the VIX curve that we've ever seen. Spot VIX was trading almost 25 points above the third-month future, so certainly extreme there. Put-call ratios have spiked for 5 days in a row. That is very, very rare, and historically it's very, very bullish.
I'm wondering, going forward, the marginal buyer, who you're looking at to sort of tip the difference. I mean, a lot of people are watching the mom and pop investor to see whether they're going to withdraw funds. How closely do you pay attention to that?
I mean, I say this out of respect, but I think this whole cycle, the mom and pop investor has really been irrelevant. This hasn't been the driver of this bull market. This bull market has been driven by the corporations themselves, right? And you get bond yields down, that's an incentive for more buybacks. And I think, secondly, the big buyer or the big player in this cycle has been passive, right? And what is very, very tied to passive is 401k money every 2 weeks. So I think if we're going to make a structural call, I think the employment data is going to be really important given the extent to which they were such a big driver of passive.
Do you expect that companies will come back in here and do share buybacks, given the fact that their shares are discounted substantially from where they were a couple weeks ago?
You know what's always been interesting? Every time we've gotten bond yields lower so quickly over such a fast period, we've actually seen Apple come into the debt market and do something. And that's kind of provided some type of a confidence low. So I'm actually really curious to see if you see some big tech companies enter the debt markets and issue some bonds here.
Let's talk trend-based technical analysis. It's always fun to do on radio. We'll try to do that with folks without people driving off the road as they can. How do you form a bottom? Is it John Maggie of a double bottom and up you go? Is it point and figure of a low pole top of Hugh Blumenthal of 1949? How does Chris Verone structurally see a bottom in SPX?
We use a phrase where we call a bang and a whimper. The bang is that initial climactic high drama decline.
That's when we get the decent cup of coffee here, and then the whimper is when we realize
and then
it's inedible.
The whimper is a couple weeks or a couple months later where you've had time to justify everything that can go wrong. You see the EPS downgrades, you see the growth downgrades, and it always feels worse on that whimper, but the internals are actually better. You tend to see fewer stocks breaking down, less volatility. So that's a pretty decent playbook. I think we had the bang. Last week was the bang. The whimper might be in front of us.
Explain it. I'm death on this, folks. Just full disclosure here. The death cross, the live cross, or well, thank God I haven't seen that in the last 48 hours. To me, the death cross is the greatest amount of technical malarkey ever known to mankind. Am I on the Verone page?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think what's more important is when you look at...
Malarkey is a Joe Biden phrase. We should do a disclaimer. The Vice President of the United States uses that word on Super Tuesday. Continue.
When you look at the set up preceding the last several weeks. We entered this period with 80% of stocks in the S&P in an uptrend. We entered this period with 17 of 20 G20 markets recently making a new 52-week high. That is typically not where bear markets come from. Bear markets are often preceded with decay from the inside. Markets rolling over. We tend to see it in credit conditions as well, credit leading lower. That didn't precede this decline. So I think if this is going to be the start of some bigger problem, and that's not our call, but if this is the start of some bigger problem, we're going to learn that over time.
Yeah, I think to see the end of the bull market, you've got to believe that we're going to have a recession in the United States, or at least you've got to believe the labor market gets hit in a material way. Can you imagine a bear market in America with the setup that we have, absent a U.S. recession?
Well, this is where I might push back a little bit, Jonathan. I think we've had 3 bear markets over the last 10 years. I think 2011 was a bear market. I think 2015, 2016 was one. And I think 18 was one as well. I recognize we never got S&P down 20, but you had 75% of all global stocks down 20% or more. So, one thing we always tell clients and we write in our own work is we just reject the idea it's a myth of a 10-year bull market. There have been some meaningful shakeouts along the way.
If you're just joining us, Bloomberg Radio worldwide with huge news flow this morning. We've had a green, and then we've really pulled back here nicely with red and green on the screen. S&P futures flat right now. With us is Christopher Verona, Strategas Research Partners, as we try to glean the market direction. John?
Just getting a headline from Taro Aso, the Japanese finance minister, that G7 teleconference call with finance ministers has been held. Waiting to see what the statement is. That headline just coming across the Bloomberg.
They've had the call?
Yes. We decided to publish a G7 statement on this. So it's the Japanese finance minister driving the news flow at the moment. I haven't seen the statement yet, but just for anyone listening right now, this news is starting to come out. This call has been taken place.
Well, that's a pullback that we've seen very clearly.
The call has taken place. Now the finance ministers are starting to release some of the details of that call.
Chris, to the technicals here, and you did great work on this in your latest deck. High beta, low beta. Describe what beta is to our audience, and do you choose the volatile, the high beta, or do you choose the toothpaste companies to be in?
I think what's been remarkable about the last several weeks is for a very risk-off macro environment, things like staples and utilities have been flushed and rinsed just like every other group, right? There was that indiscriminate selling that you often see towards the end of these corrective phases. Now, what we've seen historically, coming off of a low, the higher beta, the higher volatile stocks tend to be pretty big outperformers. So I think if you're looking for clues over the next couple of weeks, that's going to be really important.
Another clue has been the Russell 2000 small and mid-cap shares, which have consistently underperformed year after year and are down to almost twice as much or more than twice as much as the S&P 500 year to date. I'm trying to understand the signal from that because typically that's pretty bearish.
I completely disagree. I respectfully disagree. When you look historically,
we don't have any respect here. Continue.
Yeah, it's fine.
When you look
reject that.
When you look historically in the great secular bull markets of all time, 1946 to 1966, 1982 to 2000, small caps are massive underperformers in both of those periods. Small caps underperform always in secular bull markets because if you're still a small cap 10 years into an advance, what have you done wrong? Right? Why are you still a small cap stock 10 years into a rally? Shouldn't you have graduated? Yeah. And conversely, the bad large caps, you know where they go? They go down, right? The bad mid caps, they go down the cap scale. So by the 10, 15 years into an advance, you're left with the most undesirable constituent set.
Let's get to some of these headlines, Chris. We've got to let you go. Chris Verone there, Strategas partner and head of technical and macro strategy. We're starting to get some headlines from this statement now. The G7 saying they will closely monitor the spread of the virus. Taro Aso, the Japanese finance minister, speaking after this call has been held, said the statement will be released by the United States. So we're just starting to slowly get some details around this as well. The Bank of Japan Governor Kuroda was also present on the call. But so far, Tom, all we've got to go on is that the G7 closely monitoring the spread of the virus and the rate market at the moment, Tom, holding steady.
I'm seeing a disappointment come in here with a 2-year yield moving in 0.90 down to 0.8650 just in a matter of minutes. We'll follow that carefully
just
here.
To bring you this, they also reaffirm a pledge to use all policy tools for strong growth and have confirmed that they have the means to respond.
The market's about 60% back to where it was at 11 p.m. last night. Let's do this. The Bloomberg NJIT STEM report brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, offering an MBA that provides STEM professionals with a technology-focused experience. Learn more at njit.edu/MBA. Here's Bob Moon.
Tom, Jonathan, Lisa, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Apple has agreed to pay up to $500 million to settle claims over intentionally slowing down older phones to preserve batteries. The company will pay eligible iPhone users $25 for each device they own, but that amount could be reduced if too many people file claims. The case stems from admissions in 2017 that Apple was slowing down older iPhones to avoid unexpected shutdowns related to battery fatigue. Plaintiffs in the case claimed that they spent hundreds of dollars buying new phones rather than just replacing the batteries because Apple didn't reveal the true cause of the problem. A judge still needs to approve the settlement. The attorneys who filed the suit could get tens of millions of dollars in fees and expenses, up to 30% of the total settlement. China's far-reaching efforts to control the spread of the coronavirus have shuttered factories, emptied airports, and resulted in a steep drop in carbon emissions and other pollutants. There are dramatic images from NASA and the European Space Agency from pollution monitoring satellites. A noxious cloud that normally hangs over much of China virtually disappeared between the 1st of January and February 25th. Other satellite images show why, documenting a remarkable drop in traffic in Wuhan, the center of the outbreak, including visibly fewer taxis and buses near the main terminal of its airport, not to mention runways clear of airplanes. Analysts caution the dip in pollution is likely temporary. And that's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Tom, Lisa, Jonathan.
Bob Moon, thank you, sir. Let's get to the news in a moment. The statement coming out, published on the Treasury Department's website, and it reads as follows. The G7 is ready to take action, including fiscal tools where needed. Central banks will continue to fulfill mandates. And what we're seeing in the equity market, Tom, is equity futures just coming off session highs. We're positive now by just 5 points, up by 0.1%.
Bond yields move sharply lower. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, thank you very much. 3 of the Democrats who dropped out of the race for the White House now support Joe Biden's candidacy. Following Pete Buttigieg's endorsement, Senator Amy Klobuchar and former Congressman Beto O'Rourke joined Biden in Dallas last night to rally support for the former vice president. Klobuchar spoke to the crowd.
It is up to us, all of us, to put our country back together, to heal this country, and then to build something even greater.
The endorsement comes ahead of today's Super Tuesday contest in 14 states. Bloomberg will bring you coverage starting at 7 p.m. Wall Street time. At least 6 people are dead after 2 tornadoes touched down early today in Tennessee, including one that caused damage near downtown Nashville. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Thank you very much, Michael Barr, sir. That statement out on the Treasury website, Tom.
Very clear. It's a very short, I'm going to call it a long paragraph statement, but what you see in the bond market is a clear bond market disappointment with yields lower. The 2-year yield in 3 basis points, 0.87%. The benchmark 1.14%. Futures up 5. Stay with us. We'll have much more on this important coordinated statement. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. Los Angeles Clippers owner Steve Ballmer is in advanced talks with Madison Square Garden to turn the Forum in Inglewood, California, into the team's new home. According to a person familiar with the matter, the move could help resolve a dispute between MSG, Inglewood, and Ballmer, who has been attempting to build an arena nearby. MSG has been arguing that it was told a rival venue wouldn't be allowed in the area. The PGA Tour is adding a new way to connect with gamblers, the latest attempt to capitalize on the growth of legal sports betting. The men's U.S. professional golf circuit announced a partnership with Action Network, a digital media startup that sells data and analysis for bettors. Under the 2-year deal, the Action Network will rebrand its golf content as GolfBet and share it with the PGA Tour for use on its website, mobile app, and event broadcasts. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Police in Nashville are searching for injured people as
The Clash is getting ever closer. With wall-to-wall entertainment for all ages, this is more than just a game of rugby. Saturday the 18th of April, Bath take on old rivals Wasps as both teams make their push for the playoffs. With appearances from Rugby World Cup stars on each side, get ready for a day of high-octane action, both on and off the field. Tickets start from £20 for adults and £5 for kids. Book now at bathrugby.com/The Clash.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Target giving a lukewarm outlook for its profit this year, a sign the retail giant sees some challenges mounting as uncertainty reigns about the impact of the coronavirus. Its shares are little changed. Kohl's is up 5.2% after posting better than expected comparable sales and profit that topped analyst estimates, signaling the department store chain's investments in driving foot traffic may be starting to bear fruit. U.S. stock index futures, they're now little changed. S&P futures have turned lower. They're down 13 points. Dow futures are down 80. NASDAQ futures are up about 3, just struggling to stay positive. The DAX in Germany is up 1.7%. 10-year Treasury up 13/32. The yield 1.12%. The yield on the 2-year 0.85%. And NYMEX crude oil is up 1.5% or 73 cents at $47.48 a barrel. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much. John Farrow and Tom King with Lisa Abramowitz. Michael McKee, our head of international economics, to join us here in a moment. John, we've got to go over the market response here with futures clearly more red. I would go to gold, 1605, up $10 as well. And, of course, the bond market reverts back. I've got to get the chart up in the 2-year to see how we reverted back. But certainly the market takes this with an unfortunate tone.
Because we don't have an explanation of concrete actions either on the fiscal or the monetary policy side. It's almost echoing in a more coordinated response. I don't think we even had an allusion to it. Just echoing in a more coordinated response over the last couple of weeks, what they've said over the last couple of days, which is we'll look at the risk and we'll respond accordingly. Right now, equity futures roll over a little bit, down 1/3 in the bond market. Your Treasury set up as follows. Yields come in 4 basis points on 10s, down 4s on 2s now at 86 basis points. I want to get the detail of this particular statement. We go to Michael McKee for that. Mike, talk to me about the detail right now that you can see from G7 finance ministers as central bankers.
Well, the problem, John, is there isn't a lot of detail, and that's what's disappointing the markets. The setup for this had been that we were going to get some sort of plan of action and some sort of perhaps coordinated action from the central banks in particular. That was what the markets were hoping for. Instead, they got a pledge to cooperate as necessary and to do what they need to do. The main sentence is that given the potential impacts of COVID-19 on global growth, we reaffirm our commitment to use all appropriate policy tools to achieve strong, sustainable growth and safeguard against downside risks. That's about it. What are all appropriate policy tools? They may be different in each country, but so far there's been no announcement. We'll have to see If the Japanese Taro Aso, the finance minister,
said a lot,
has spoken, but we haven't heard anything from the U.S. side. We haven't heard anything from the European side.
I think we should be careful here because it doesn't mean things aren't going to happen. They could well happen in the coming hours, the coming days.
That's true.
What's clear, though, Mike, is that developing a coordinated response at the G7 level is still complex. It's still difficult, and perhaps more complex than it was several years back.
It is. This, though, I think is a communications issue. They let the market get ahead of itself, and they've disappointed the market.
Wait,
that's not what they wanted to do.
Hold on one second. Before we get carried away, we aren't necessarily seeing such a clear response from markets. We've got futures bouncing back, S&P still slightly negative, but the NASDAQ and Dow, they are bouncing back a little bit. People trying to interpret this, we're seeing yields go back down near session lows. People looking at this, the idea that they're committed to strong growth and policy response of all types and coordination with one another was exactly what a lot of people were calling for, right? I mean, what could they have gotten done in such a short period of time and provided to markets given all the uncertainty with the coronavirus?
Well, they probably can't get a whole lot done, but then you don't let the expectations run away, and that's the problem. Since this call was announced and they said we were going to put the central bankers on the call with the finance ministers, the markets have been basically pricing in the idea that somebody would be cutting rates today. Some sort of monetary policy reaction would happen. I don't think anybody expected an immediate fiscal response. This reminds me a little bit the statement of 2009 when Gordon Brown put the G20 group together, and they basically said the same thing, but then we were already in the middle of rate cuts, and so people considered that more a success.
I should probably do a LinkedIn article on this, John. How do you read one of these silly statements? And what you do is you only read the verbs. All the rest of it is McKee knows. McKee could have written it 2 nights ago.
The good news with this statement is that you can read it quickly. Yes, there's not much to read.
But you look at the verbs, okay, they led. They issued. They're closely monitoring.
Tom,
I mean, that's what you
me,
get.
the biggest mistake you could make right now is allow the market to shape the narrative of this particular conversation. I'm not interested in what markets are doing right now. My problem with G7 leaders, and G20 leaders for that matter, is they've been monitoring the risk now for weeks. They had a G20 meeting in Riyadh a couple of weekends ago, and the complacency was palpable. So I'm not interested in whether they cut rates today, tomorrow. They're going to cut rates. Most people think they will. That's going to happen in the minds of so many people. It would be incredibly unlikely that the Fed doesn't follow through and that the ECB and BOJ don't look to do something as well. For me, Mike, what concerns me is just how late they are to all of this and how little has been done to prepare some policy tools that they can deploy if they need to, other than rate cuts, other than QE.
Well, for central banks, there isn't a whole lot else. The European Central Bank, there's some thought that they would do an extended TLTRO program, targeted long-term refinancing. Basically, money goes to the banks so that the banks can lend it on. But at this point, it doesn't look like there's much more that the Fed can do. The question is, what can we do on the fiscal side as well? None of that is easy. It's easy to cut rates. And as you say, John, it's not going to make a difference. But what else can they do? And that may be some of their reluctance. I do want to suggest that you were right, though, John, in saying that this doesn't rule out the Fed doing something today. It just says that they're going to coordinate.
Well, and the idea that they really emphasized a timely and coordinated response, I think, is something that people were looking for as well, right? I mean, they're aware of exactly that point, John, trying to respond to things in real time. But there's a liability here. If they cut too quickly and it's a temporary issue, what do they have left if things go south, right? I mean, and then they get accused of being held hostage to markets, and every 5 minutes the market change, they respond. I mean,
I'm not accusing them of being held hostage to markets. They are. That's why we've got the call.
This is the old National Lampoon, buy this magazine or we'll shoot this dog, cover.
Just by definition, they have been held hostage by markets.
Well, at this point, there is no discernible effect on the United States economy. So what we're talking about is the markets. The markets have gone down. So if you're reacting to anything, you're reacting to the markets and the possibility. The Fed's only concerned, they don't care if you, the trader, lose money, but they're concerned that if everybody's 401ks go down and they stop spending. So that would be the reason for some sort of Fed reaction if they do it. And at this point, they've sort of disappointed the markets. Now, you look at the fact that they're still bouncing around zero or positive. You still have rate cuts priced in. The market thinks it's coming.
It's just almost 4. It's a huge disappointment in the market right now. I want to be really clear about that. My disappointment is how long it's taken to get some of these officials together and actually think about how they're going to respond to this.
I would, just to be fair, John, I think they have been talking. They have gotten together.
They have been.
It takes a while to do this.
But Mike, 2 weekends ago, they were in Riyadh flying hawks when they should have been behind closed doors thinking about how to respond to a real crisis.
Well, I suspect they were. This is the kind of thing that has to work its way up.
You don't see the pictures? That's what they were doing in Riyadh 2 weekends ago at the G20, flying Falcons.
So this is the new thing now that we've done the Premier League to death. Take Tom out and teach him to fly Falcons.
Equity futures down 1/3%. From New York, this is Bloomberg Radio.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This is the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry he wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time he hops on a bus. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings account.
Hey, big ears.
What?
Have you heard?
What?
Ford are offering £20 off a spring service.
You what?
That's right. £20 off when you book online using code FORD20. Problem is...
What?
We're rabbits.
Book now at Ford.co.uk or search Ford Service. Retail customers at participating Ford dealers. Cannot be used with other Ford service promotions. Only one voucher per customer per booking.
Get priority tickets to AVA London with Orbital, Joy Orbison, Ross from Friends, Peach and more. If you're on O2, you'll have access to VIP, all with priority. AVA London, at Printworks on the 14th of March. Unforgettable live music experiences with O2. O2, breathe it all in. Terms apply.
Your new neighbour is a musician. His creative peak is at 3 a.m. They're doing roadworks next to your house. A famous teen star moves onto your street. There's always a reason to travel. Fly with Lufthansa's incredible fares around the world to destinations like Nairobi, Cape Town or Johannesburg. Book now on Lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Down the right side of the lane, stops at the elbow jumper. Up and good!
TuneIn is your destination for college basketball, and it's free. This week we have a must-hear game: North Carolina at Duke.
Two for the win! No, tapped up by Moore, and in at the buzzer! Moore makes it in!
This Saturday, tip-off is at 6 p.m. Eastern. With college basketball and TuneIn, hear every call from games around the country live. Search college sports to listen free today.
Have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. from the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
American economic power and future depends on trade deals.
In many of these countries, we've still seen people struggling.
Finance.
We're in this vortex of uncertainty. These big companies, they just sometimes lack focus.
Investment.
The markets have become a little bit too addicted to the Fed.
Timing the market is just so difficult.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. We stand ready to give you information in this hour. We'll get to the guests here in a moment. The G7 stands ready. In their last two paragraphs, they stand ready. John Farrow and Tom Keene standing ready with Lisa Abramowitz looking at the markets here with red and green on the screen after that big bounce yesterday. And we stand ready also to talk Super Tuesday as well, because the different candidates stand ready for an eventful evening tonight. John, are you standing ready, Mr. Farrow?
I'm standing ready for the market open 90 minutes away. Any disappointment out there? I don't think there's a whole lot looking at the market reaction. We're down 0.1% on the S&P 500. If you thought the Fed was going to cut rates, if you thought the Fed was going to cut rates, you still think the Fed is going to cut rates. My disappointment with these officials is it's taken so long for them to look at the risks that were emerging in China at the start of January, the middle of January, to actually coordinate any kind of response whatsoever.
Yeah, I've seen a number of these. Simon Kennedy, of course, running all of our print coverage here on economics. I've been at very historic meetings where the G7 actually said something. I remember being at the St. Regis Hotel with Simon sitting right next to him at a great, Jon Snow moment where they actually said something. I don't see that in the statement. The verbs in the statement are as simple as you can get.
Ready to take action seems to be the story. There's a reason the front end of the yield curve in the Treasury market is still bid. We're down 4 basis points on twos to 86 basis points. If you think the Fed is going to act, you still think the Fed is going to act after that statement.
Right now I'm looking at Fed funds futures, and they are pricing in still 4 rate cuts, to your point, by the end of this year. But I'm trying to understand what they could have said earlier, because this is not a monetary problem, right? I mean, this is sort of the key question, because dropping rates won't necessarily, to me, I'm trying to understand what confidence this is giving investors if the real issue is the credit markets still aren't easing up, that you're still seeing deals getting pulled, the IPOs, Airbnb, we've got, Warner, people not trying to access the markets right now.
Before we get to our esteemed guest, and this is a really important guest coming up, folks, I do want to mention that NBER has a dual mandate, fine, but Jeffrey Frankel of Harvard University with some research a number of years ago, in a sense, Lisa, broadened out what the mandate is at the Fed. And to your point, there's a squishiness to their mandate on economic growth. And the core issue is, do you see U.S. real GDP coming in coming quarters because of the virus? We do this with futures at -5, Dow futures 26,462, really flat on the day. Liz Ann Saunders is at Charles Schwab, and she is without question the best guest we have on the flow of funds, what people are actually doing with their money. In this crisis, Liz Ann, good morning. What are we doing with our investable accounts?
Well, let me start on the fund side, and this is broader data than just Schwab's, but in the case of equity ETFs, last week was the fifth largest outflow. Not a big surprise. On traditional mutual funds, it was the ninth consecutive week of outflows, all of which was on the domestic side of things. Actually, international mutual funds picked up flows, and you also saw flows out of emerging markets in Japan. Also, again, not much of a surprise. But what I find more interesting is when we look at our direct clients, those that manage in a very disciplined strategic asset allocation way, they heed our advice with regard to diversification and, very importantly, rebalancing, systematic rebalancing. They are fine. There's no panic. They were trimming holdings during the move into all-time highs in January. So we just find those that take a more disciplined strategic approach tend to ride through these periods much more easily.
If you rebalance on Super Liz Ann Saunders Tuesday, how do you choose to rebalance?
Well, it's a function of the makeup of your portfolio. Rebalancing obviously means your portfolio is going to tell you when it's time to do something based on asset classes that move out of whack relative to your strategic allocation. If you're on the more aggressive end of the spectrum, it probably means you had more in the risk assets like equities, maybe outside of U.S. equities. If you're on the more conservative end of the spectrum, your bias was already probably more toward fixed income. And interestingly, as a result, you may be trimming some of your safer fixed income bets now. So it's really a function of how you have strategically allocated your assets in terms of what the call is going to be. And that's a beautiful thing about rebalancing. You don't have to worry about which Yahoo on Bloomberg Radio is going to have the right bombastic market call.
Does that? See how
your
she does
your
that?
portfolio tells you when it's time to do something, and you know what it does? It puts us on the right side of the trade.
See how
it
she
forces
does
us
that?
to do what we know we're supposed to: buy low, sell high, or add low, sell high.
She's a massive Sandra Shade. We call that
throwing
massive.
shade. Any Yahoo.
It's really as close to a free lunch as you get in this business.
Lizanne, whenever I hear you talk, you do a great job of just giving me the insight into the feel of the market right now, what people expect, investor expectations. Help me with this one. We've just had a G7 statement. People who thought the Fed was going to act still think the Fed is going to act. Mm-hmm. If the Fed waits until March 18th, do you think they can wait that long?
I think it depends on what expectations do. Clearly, last week we saw a spike in expectations that not only they would move, they would likely move pre the meeting and maybe as much as 50 basis points. I think if we see those expectations settle down, then it suggests the market might be comfortable waiting. I just think we have to assess whether the whole narrative around any kind of provision of liquidity by central banks automatically means risk assets go up, regardless of what any fundamental deterioration is. And I think that's going to be an interesting tell in this environment. Are we sort of losing that narrative, that connection between central bank provision of liquidity, regardless of what it's for? Last fall, buying T-bills to stabilize the repo market, fed into a massive equity market rally. The plumbing didn't bring it that way directly, but it was the narrative. And I think key will be whether that narrative persists.
Any evidence that narrative is shifting at the moment?
Not necessarily. I mean, you saw Powell's comments come right at the point where you saw the pretty significant turn in the market on Friday. I think the trick will be if the Fed does something, let's say 50 basis points, either in advance of or during, yet you still see COVID-19 related weakness in the economy, particularly if it starts to send a message of a near-term recession, even if it's what they often call a technical recession, then I think you might start to see some skepticism, because we know the reality is that looser monetary policy doesn't solve a supply shock. And this is a massive supply shock. It's also a demand shock, but the nature of the demand shock is also not one that traditional monetary policy can solve in the near term. This is probably more on the fiscal policy side in terms of what sort of leaders can do in this type of environment, in this type of shock.
Liz, I want to build on what you're talking about, which is the Fed model not working anymore. Lower rates not necessarily making a valuation argument for stocks. Do you already see that narrative shifting in your own conversations with investors, where you're saying to them, listen, the Fed is cutting because there could be a slowdown that's going to affect the E part of the equation here?
Well, that's the rub right now. We know that if they can effectively loosen financial conditions, that usually is a major support for valuations. It's the reason why in 2019 we saw multiple expansion with almost no growth from the E, versus 2018 where we had tons of E, but multiples contracted because we had tighter financial conditions. This environment now is tricky because not only has the P been declining, but the E is declining with no sense by the analyst community of where it goes to. I think what's troubling is that companies are simply withdrawing guidance. They're not lowering guidance. So analysts are stymied because the companies don't know what to say about guidance. We know numbers are too high at this point. They just don't know where to take them.
On Schwab 101, do you want to buy large cap? Do you want to reaffirm a domestic ownership? Is it a massive international opportunity?
domestic, but we have, for almost 3 years now, we have had an overweight to large cap and an underweight to small cap. And I think definitively that's where you want to stay right now for a variety of reasons. One, better profitability trends, much better profit margins trends, the ability to be more nimble with regard to supply chains, whether it's a function of tariffs and trade or more recently the virus, substantially higher debt levels amongst smaller cap companies, substantially higher percentage of, so-called zombie companies. So I think the fundamentals are clearly still way biased toward large cap over small cap. And I think it's still an appropriate way to kind of play the spread in an otherwise what we've been sort of neutral overall domestic equity exposure with that bias toward large cap and bias away from small cap. And I think you stick with that.
You sound a little bit on the bearish side, or at least like we're getting to the end of a cycle. And I'm just wondering where the havens are. Where are you telling people to park?
Well, I wouldn't call myself bearish. I mean, we've been a bit more cautious in the last couple of years, just viewing that we're getting late in the cycle and that we're likely to see more frequent bouts of volatility and pullbacks or corrections. And that certainly was the case in 2018. And again, this year we had a nice smooth ride in 2019. But we're really not espousing anything terribly unique in this environment. We've just been pounding the table more loudly on the need to rebalance, especially when we saw that spike in January, not so much in the market, we hit all-time highs, but in terms of many measures of sentiment, both behavioral and attitudinal measures of sentiment by the end of January had gotten to levels even beyond what we saw circa 1999 and 2000. So that was telling you that there was a risk, if we got a negative catalyst, which of course we did, that the correction or the pullback could be swifter and more severe than if we were in a more subdued sentiment environment. So there's just too much complacency. So that's really what we've been doing in this environment, is not saying run for the hills, go underweight equities, just be mindful of rebalancing more frequently.
Lizanne, thank you so much. Ms. Saunders is with Charles Schwab. Joe Brasuelis over at RSM just has an important note where he looks to 100 basis points, a rate cut out there somewhere. What's important here is Joe Brasuelis, John, was just absolutely brilliant through the crisis on a sustained low rate regime. He was really, really quite good. With that, the news in New York City on this Super Tuesday. Michael Barr.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, John. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders goes head-to-head against former Vice President Joe Biden's swelling support from moderates heading into today, Super Tuesday. More than 1,300 delegates are up for grabs in 14 states, and that will set the course for the Democratic presidential race, likely. Speaking at a rally in St. Paul, Minnesota, Senator Sanders requested Super Tuesday support.
I'm here tonight to respectfully ask for your support tomorrow. I am asking not only for your support, I'm asking you to bring out your friends, your co-workers, your aunts, your uncles. Let us have a huge voter turnout in Minnesota tomorrow.
Meanwhile, Biden has picked up endorsements from several former Democratic presidential hopefuls ahead of today's Super Tuesday contest. Biden has the endorsements from Pete Buttigieg, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rourke, who all dropped out of the race. News agencies in Iran are reporting that the head of the country's emergency medical services is now ill with the coronavirus. He is just the latest top official in Iran's government to catch the virus and become sick. The news comes as Iran's supreme leader ordered the armed forces to help health officials. President Trump met with drug company executives yesterday about the coronavirus, and executives with drug makers told Trump that they were making rapid progress on vaccines. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. That was the news with Michael. Here's your price action. Equities fade from session highs to negative around about 0.1%. The G7 keeping communication vague following its call with finance ministers and central banks chiefs. But central bank rate cuts still remain elevated. That's why in the bond market we still have a bid. Treasuries come in 3 basis points on twos to 87 basis points. From New York, this is Bloomberg Radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge, with money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet, that's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. 8:17 on Wall Street. S&P futures are little change. Let's go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. U.S. futures sink from the highs after the G7 held off any measures for now. Dow futures are up 32 points. We're up 300. S&P futures down 2, and Nasdaq futures are higher by 28. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.13%, and Shanghai rose 0.7% overnight, while European markets are still trading higher, led by gains in Germany. Back in the U.S. on the economic front, U.S. February auto sales. After the bell last night, Tilray Q4 revenue missed the lowest estimate. Shares are down 14% in the pre-market, and Visa saw Q2 net revenue growth lower due to the virus. Regarding earnings this morning, Target full-year adjusted EPS forecast midpoint missed estimates, and Kohl's EPS beat estimates. In deal news, Thermo Fisher to buy Kyogen for $10 billion. And wrapping things up, UPS was raised to buy a Deutsche Bank, American Express raised to buy a DZ Bank, Tesla was raised to market perform at JMP with a price target of $1,060, and AMD raised to overweight over at Piper. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Thank you, Karen. Greatly appreciate that. Citigroup out with a very important research note, John, before we get to politics and Super Tuesday on G7. And they don't mince any words about it. The G7 statement, quote, certainly does not rule out rate cuts of a set.
Yeah, I think that's the mind of many people right now, that this changed nothing about rate cut expectations.
Yeah.
Citi going on to say that for the Fed, the statement itself indicates waiting until the March 18th FOMC to cut rates.
That's
It's their
long ways
base
away.
case. It's their base case. And they're saying it would be an appropriate course of action as well. It feels like a lifetime away, doesn't it,
does.
to wait until
Long
March
time away.
18th.
Well, there's a
I just
question
wonder whether
about-
the market can wait that long as well.
There's a question about communication, too. If they signal that we're going to cut 25 basis points in March, 25 basis points in April, will that be enough?
Well, we'll just, have to see, and that'll be based on the economic data. Right now, to get us not to March 18th, but far more importantly, to get us to tonight, we have truly one of the leaders in doing more intelligent polling. Mohammed Yunus is editor-in-chief with Gallup, and he joins us now on the way they look at the presidential horse race, and they look at it much differently than, numbers here and numbers there. Mohammed, what is the key insight of your new data released this morning?
Well, this morning and a little later tonight, we will officially be releasing our new presidential approval number. We have President Trump at 47% approval, 51% disapproval. That's a little bit low from his high, which he came to right after the impeachment situation unfolded. But more importantly, what you were just discussing in your earlier segment is really, I think, where a huge question is for us at Gallup that we'll track. It's just the economy and how people feel about it. The president tends to get his best numbers on that. 63% of Americans approve of how he's managing the economy. We know from previous elections that the economy is the number one issue that people mention when we ask, what do you think about when you're voting for president? It's quickly followed by healthcare and immigration. So the concern with the virus, the market reaction last week, and what that means for Americans and their assessment of their economic outlook as we get closer to November are really going to be key. The other critical metric, I think, for today, really Super Tuesday, in this competition we see unfolding very dramatically now between Vice President Biden and Senator Sanders, is whether or not Americans will vote for a socialist. Right now, we ask Americans and have for years, would you vote for somebody who is qualified but happens to be black, Hispanic, gay or lesbian, etc.? The most resistance of all of the categories we ask, including atheist, is actually socialist. So 53% of Americans say they would not vote for a socialist. 43% say they would. Just to give you listeners a comparison, 96% they say they vote for a black candidate, 94% for a Hispanic. So the socialism thing is still a major challenge on the national level, at least. Of course, within the Democratic Party, there are different attitudes than at the national level. But obviously, the debate that Democrats are having now is that going to be enough to beat President Trump? We've been asking Democrats what they prioritize in this election, whether they want to vote for somebody they agree with on the issues or beat President Trump. And beating President Trump is their priority.
So, Mohammed, it makes me wonder, why does Senator Sanders do so well in the head-to-head polls with the President of the United States?
It really depends on how those polls are gathered and how many people are answering that really represent the population in those states. State-to-state polling is very challenging here in the United States. The other thing to keep in mind is turnout. So people can say what they want in a poll, but if these candidates can't really get people out on the day to vote, and we saw Senator Sanders, for example, in Nevada, really getting aggressive in trying to get people to vote early. It's still, the polls are helpful state to state, but ultimately we'll have to see tonight where things lie. A really critical part in some of these states is going to be demographics. So we saw South Carolina and the black vote really sort of bring President Biden much more strongly into the forefront of the race. But, he's going to have challenges in other places where you have younger voters and people that are much more comfortable with questioning the establishment and the status quo. People who gravitate more towards a narrative that Senator Sanders has been providing.
Mohammed, just to wrap things up, I'm wondering, from your perspective with the economy, how closely tied is sentiment to the stock market versus just whether people can get jobs?
That's a great question. There isn't an easy answer because it tends to change. One of the challenges in giving a straight answer to that really is the Great Recession. because people that are assessing the economy today probably remember that and associate the market very strongly with unemployment, it's going to be hard to imagine a reality where the market tanks and people still feel great about the economy. One thing that's interesting that we found over time is that people claim, at least, to be less invested in the economy than they were in the market, than they were in 2008. So when you compare, I'm asking Americans, do you have money in the stock market in 2008? There are 10% fewer Americans today that say they have money in the stock market, which is pretty remarkable considering how much growth we've seen in the stock market.
Extremely thoughtful. Mohammed Yunus, thank you so much. It is different polling that from Gallup this morning. What do we make of this market right now? To me, it's like a churn, and is it literally just waiting to see what Chairman Powell could or would do?
Rate cut expectations are still elevated, even after that statement that was very vague. I would have preferred to see some concrete steps on how they can act in a coordinated manner. It's too early. Quite clearly, they haven't been working on it together for long enough.
To me, the telltale signal is oil. Brent crude 53.24 up $1.34. West Texas American oil up $1.37, 48.12. I mean, oil has a nice lift.
Yeah, telltale signal for me is what's happening with market pricing. We still see the front end of the yield curve very, very big. Yield's down 3 basis points. I think we're at 0.87% on a 2-year yield. If you thought the Fed was going to cut rates, nothing about that statement changes things whatsoever.
To support aggressive growth, to a robust growth. To me, that's a significant statement. It's not just about preventing disinflation. This is about supporting growth going forward.
We will see. Futures up 13, Dow futures up 166, and the VIX, well, it's in from 42.43, that level 33.50. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. A group of 7 finance chiefs say they're ready to act to shelter their economies from the spreading coronavirus, but they stop short of giving us any details of what they intend to do. Stocks surged yesterday on Wall Street, the most in just over a year, as investors grew more confident that governments and policymakers would act to offset any impact from the coronavirus. The Dow yesterday surged almost 1,300 points. The U.S. lab equipment maker Thermo Fisher Scientific has agreed to buy QIAGEN, a Dutch maker of tests for diseases including cancer and the coronavirus. The price tag is $10 billion. Health deals have heated up this week after a slow start to the year. And checking crude still higher, although it has pared some of its earlier gains, up now almost 2% at $47.66 a barrel. Dow futures up 28, NASDAQ futures up 28 points, S&P futures are down 1. European markets still showing solid gains. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. They don't just talk to the most important people.
Is it as ominous this time around?
They talk with the most interesting people.
Are they taking this seriously?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We are live on Bloomberg Radio, where equity futures recover a little bit, back in positive territory, up 0.4%, positive 13 points. Ahead of some economic data coming up over the next couple of days. Tomorrow, the appetizer ahead of the payrolls report, the ADP employment report for the month of February. We'll get that services PMI that we had a week ago, the final read of that, a little bit later in the week as well. And then coming up on Friday, Tom, is the main event. It is payrolls Friday. But before that, I think a read that a lot of people are going to pay increasingly more attention to, initial jobless claims coming up on Thursday.
Yeah, that's a weekly data set and always very important. You see it every week, folks, and a lot of people, I know Drew Mattis at MetLife is one person, really puts heavy weight in weekly data. But I'm glad you mentioned payrolls, because in the blur of the news, and particularly our distraction with this epidemic bordering on pandemic, I'd completely forgotten that Friday is
There just seems to be a negative bias around the data at the moment, Tom. If it's decent, it means it's old. And if it's bad, it must be really bad. And we've seen that out of China, we've seen that out of Europe, and we've seen that in several data points here in the United States as well. And I'm not sure how that negative bias changes before Friday. I want to bring Diane Swan, Grant Thornton Chief Economist. She joins us on the phone for more. Diane, fantastic to have you with us. Your expectations and how much weight you'll put on the data as the week grows older.
Well, it is important. We are going to see a sort of bounce back or a rebound to the downside from the unseasonably mild winter weather. Remember, we got 44,000 construction worker jobs that added to that 225,000 in January with unseasonably mild winter weather. We got the ISM on manufacturing out, and the coronavirus did show up as one of the issues disrupting production activity. We know mining's going to continue to decline, and then we've got the ongoing restructuring in retail with retail closing. So I think we're going to get a pretty weak number, around 140,000 or so, which will have only a small tinge of the coronavirus in it. But we are coming off that high number in January. It's a bit of a, sort of snap back to normal after that unseasonably mild weather boosted the January figure.
Diane, I want you to pick up on the coronavirus effect and how bad it could be in the United States. A lot of people saying that the U.S. is somewhat immune to the severe effects that we saw over in China. But if you do get some sort of slowdown, how much could employment be reduced?
It's a great question. I don't think we are immune to the effects. I think that's a foolish way to look at it. And of course, I'm coming from someone whose child just returned from Japan and another child who's severely asthmatic and cannot afford to get pneumonia. And we already went through the swine flu in my family, so I'm very aware of how these things work. But on the other side of it, I think it's very important. We've already seen, I've lost count of the number of cancellations. I can't go to a meeting that I have at the Chicago Fed on Friday this week because my daughter just came back from Japan. These are really important because those kind of interruptions to business activity, staying at home, the nesting, the sort of preparing to deal with a larger contagion is going to have an impact on the U.S. economy. Travel plans have already been canceled. Yeah. The airlines are being really hard hit. And we're looking at about a 0.5% growth in the first half of the year. That will nudge up the unemployment rate.
Well, that's right where I wanted to go, is the linkage of that 0.5% of real GDP. Then what is the mathematics to bring that over to the weekly claims or to the monthly non-farm payroll statistic?
We're not going to see that for a couple weeks yet. I don't think we'll see this week the uptick in furloughs and layoffs related to the coronavirus. I think that's going to show up more as we move into March. There's a lag between when people first get furloughed and the layoffs on how they're going to show up in the numbers. But I think as we get into March, you're going to start to really see these numbers, and you'll dip below that 100,000 threshold we need to keep the unemployment rate steady.
Diane Swank with us, folks, with Grant Thornton, and of course with her Michigan academics and her heritage with Chicago, straddling the line between the White Sox and the Cubs. Always good to speak to her of the spirit of the Midwest. Diane, you know well that path out of Chicago down south into the auto heartland, all the auto suppliers and such. How are they doing in the Midwest right now?
So right now, the automakers have done pretty well at being able to sort of stem shortages and resource supply. That said, the smallest suppliers, the middle market suppliers that trickle up into the automakers are starting to have real problems. We already know places like Long Beach, where a lot of parts and imports from China come in, the port is half of the longshoremen have been laid off there. And I think that's very important because you're going to start to see these part shortages work their way through the manufacturing sector much more dramatically as we get into the first weeks of March. Things that could keep going because they prepared for the Lunar New Year are now starting to catch up with them. So for the moment, we're starting to see it trickle in, but it will compound fairly rapidly as we get into the weeks of March.
Diane, this is such an important point, especially as we talk about some sort of policy response with the G7 meeting today and financial ministers meeting and central bankers. The question is, how much does that offset furloughed workers, people not getting paid because there just isn't business, whether it's at a convention or a hotel or an airline? And I'm wondering, what's the precedent historically for policymakers to step in and actually ameliorate some of the effects of missed paychecks from people who are probably on the margins, less capable of offsetting that lost income?
Well, we don't have a lot of precedent except for when we have natural disasters, and the Fed actually can do some guidance when it cuts rates, I think, by 0.5%. At its March meeting, we'll see a decisive move there. But we also can see guidance in terms of allowing consumers who have been laid off and businesses that have been furloughed or taking the brunt of this and unable to fully service their debt obligations. There is some leeway in their guidance to be able to allow them to give them a little room and a little space. It's something that China's looking at. They're ordering it, a little different than in the United States, and it's something that Italy is looking at now as well.
I've never asked this question. It's a good question for Diane Swank. If I'm employed in Long Beach, as an example, and I'm laid off, what do I get when I go in for jobless claims? How much do I get? X% of my salary? Do I make money doing this? What do you get?
You don't make money doing it. It's still less than what you get if you're earning your pay, and you're certainly not working overtime hours, and it reduces hours worked. But you do, if you don't think the layoff is going to be temporary, you do go ahead and apply for unemployment insurance. We often see that the ripple effects from strikes take a while from not the striking workers, but the other workers. It takes a while for people to actually apply for unemployment insurance because they think they're going to be called back quickly.
How does that work in England, John? Do they have weekly jobless claims in England?
We don't get the data the way you guys get the data, but we do have a claimant account.
Does the government step in much more overtly in socialist Great Britain versus
socialist Great
Midwest?
Britain?
He's never been laid off.
Gigs at socialist Great Britain.
I don't know. I'm just,
Well, in all fairness, let's bring this up as well. The UK has now warned that, if we don't take care of this and don't contain this, it could be 20% of the labor force that's out sick. And so many people say, well, these efforts to contain it are causing the economic shocks. But if you don't contain it, you have an even larger economic impact on your labor force unable to earn.
I mean, we're not talking G7 60,000 feet stuff, John, but this is germane to what could actually happen in April.
This is the important conversation we've been trying to have on this program for the last couple of weeks, that interest rate cuts aren't the remedy we need right now. What we need is a set of tools, Diane. They're going to stop this economic shock that would otherwise be temporary from becoming a financial shock that lasts a whole lot longer. They're looking at doing that, as you say, in Italy, with tax credits for struggling companies. In China, they're working with the banks as well. What tools do we have available in America?
Well, this is, we have much more marginalized tools, and I don't think, it'll be interesting to see whether Congress has more tools with fiscal policy. We have some guidance that the Fed can issue and make it easier with the Community Reinvestment Act to deal with this as a crisis and to say be more lenient, and, we will be more lenient with you as your regulator. That's important, but more broadly, you need fiscal policy that deals with this more directly, and, just calling for rate cuts doesn't cure what ails us literally in terms of the coronavirus. It doesn't open idle factories or open convention centers that have been shuttered because of this, but we can use fiscal policy to span the issue so that it doesn't morph into a financial crisis, as you said, Jonathan. And already last week we saw the junk bond market basically seize up. That's really important right now, given some of the inflated ratings we've seen on bonds that could dip into that junk bond status.
Diane Swak, what is quote-unquote fiscal policy to X% of people that see reduced wages, they're laid off, they take extra vacation days or whatever? Are you advocating fiscal helicopter money, or are you advocating a road between Peoria and Moline?
Well, it's not really fiscal helicopter money. It is actually, in Hong Kong, they're actually giving cash checks out to people, and even that's not enough to get people who are still afraid to go out to go out and spend. But it is important for people to have money to be able to buy groceries. And, you're talking about people being able to pay for rent and thinking about some kind of plans that give people more of a bridge than just unemployment insurance, or make unemployment insurance temporarily a little more generous and kick in much more rapidly. I think those are the things that we need to be thinking about right now. And those are the things, we haven't been thinking about our automatic stabilizers. The Fed has been pleading, along with central banks the world over, with, the fiscal Congress and fiscal policy setters, elected officials, to start thinking about how would they deal with the recession. Well, this one is really unique. This kind of economic disruption is really unique and will require some effort by Congress to get it right.
Diane, just real quick here, how convinced are you about a doom loop that will take hold with supply and demand kind of circling each other down if there isn't some sort of fiscal response?
Well, I doubt there won't be any fiscal response. I do think there will be. The question is, will it be the right fiscal response? I'm still hopeful. I have to stay hopeful, and I think that's the way we have to stay. And it's remarkable how resilient we've been. But we are talking about what's a growth recession here in the United States, and what's in the rest of the world, for all intents and purposes, a recession in the first half of the year.
Diane, thank you so much. Diane Swak with Grant Thornton with us today. With the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, thank you very much. The moderates in the Democratic Party are uniting ahead of the huge Super Tuesday contest today. More than 1,300 delegates are up for grabs in 14 states. You can hear coverage of Super Tuesday starting at 7 p.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg. Beto O'Rourke is the latest former Democratic presidential candidate to endorse Joe Biden. The former Texas congressman appeared at Biden's rally in Dallas last night, along with Amy Klobuchar.
It is up to us, all of us, to put our country back together, to heal this country, and then to build something even greater. I believe we can do this together. And that is why today I am ending my campaign and endorsing Joe Biden for president.
Biden also nabbed the endorsement of Pete Buttigieg, who suspended his campaign and appeared with the former vice president last night. 7 major economies pledged to use all appropriate tools to deal with the spreading coronavirus, but announced no immediate actions. The G7 said today that it was ready to take actions, including fiscal measures where appropriate, to aid in the response to the virus and support the economy. Tornadoes ripped across Tennessee early today, killing at least 7 people. This Nashville resident was home when the twister hit.
After it hit, we got it to go outside, and the whole back of the roof was caved in. The front of it's caved in. We have no porch, and all the houses down our street are completely gone.
One twister hit downtown Nashville, collapsing about 40 buildings around the city. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. I'll be as delicate as I can with this one. Equity futures have just rolled over just a little bit, not dramatically so. We're just very slightly negative. A headline crossing the Bloomberg coming from Reuters that a New York City high school has closed after a suspected coronavirus case. The closing is a precautionary measure. This coming from Reuters. I stress the New York City High School saying it's a precautionary measure, but it has closed after a suspected coronavirus case, and equity futures are just a tiny bit lower. No massive move here, but just very slightly. We just rolled over, Tom, as that headline crossed the Bloomberg.
No question about it here. Was futures flat right now, John?
Let's get the bond market price action for you as well. The G7 communique comes out, a statement that does not do much to change rate cut expectations. Yields are still lower at the front end, coming in 4 basis points on 10s to around about 0.86% on a 2-year yield. On 10s right now, your yield 1.127%. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. We could be about to see a new wave of home buying. The website showingtime.com says foot traffic at open houses and other showings jumped more than 20% in January from a year ago, and the number of appointments per listing surged to record highs. The biggest gain coming in the West. The showing index there jumped more than 30%, and foot traffic of potential home buyers also increased about 20% in the South and Northeast, and about 16% in the Midwest. This could be thanks in part to low mortgage rates, and the average rate on a 30-year fixed about 3.5% last week, according to Freddie Mac. This could drop even lower this week if investors keep fleeing to treasuries because of the coronavirus. Don't expect bargain prices on homes, though. The National Association of Realtors says the median sale price on existing homes jumped 6.8% in January from a year ago. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Connecting.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Mary?
So I know it's tempting to pour used cooking oil straight down the sink, but I spoke to the local council and they said the best way to get rid of oil or fat is to collect it, once it's cooled down, of course, in a used container. And then you can scoop it out and put it in the bin.
Cooking oils and fats block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Do you go on the same holiday every year? To the same country, in the same hotel, with the same sea view, visit the same ancient monuments, play by the same dolphin-shaped pool, meet the same Barrys and Sandras, and wear the same Hawaiian shirt that you'd never wear at home? Then maybe it's time to switch it up. Starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. And U.S. stock index futures have been swinging between gains and losses. Treasuries are advancing after a group of 7 finance ministers said they were ready to combat the impact of the coronavirus, but held off any action for now. Risk assets had surged around the world in anticipation of a coordinated move. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures, they're little change right now. Dow futures up 37, NASDAQ futures up 31. The DAX in Germany's up 2%. 10-year Treasury up 10/30 seconds, yield 1.13%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.85%. NYMEX crude oil up 2.2%. Oil is extending its rebound from last week's slump as global policymakers pledge to safeguard markets from the coronavirus. This while OPEC and its allies are expected to deepen production cuts. Right now, NYMEX crude oil again up 2.2% or $1.06 at $47.82 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.6% or $9.80 at $16.0460 an ounce. Right now, the euro's at 1.1110 against the dollar, British pound 1.2782, and the yen is at 107.80. Again, the S&P 500 little changed, and we spoke to Chris Verone of Strategas Research, and he still sees some positive indicators out there for stocks.
Put call ratios have spiked for 5 days in a row. That is very, very rare, and historically, it's very, very bullish.
And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom.
Karen, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that this morning. Let me say good morning to all of you across this nation. It is Super Tuesday. It is without question widely anticipated and has become ever more fascinating just in the past 2-3 days with many moving towards the vice president. Kevin Cerulli joins us now, our chief Washington correspondent. Kevin, is your analysis or your belief or your construct of this important day dramatically changed in the last few days, or is it pretty much played out as you expected?
It's played out exactly as I've expected. I think last week when I was on your show, we talked about how after the South Carolina primary, we were going to anticipate candidates dropping out and endorsing, and that's precisely what happened. And so I think from here, it really becomes a 2-person race between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. And I think that there's going to be increased pressure on the other candidates who are still in, Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg, about the longevity of their campaign, especially at a time when there's going to be pressure coming from both Bernie Sanders as well as Joe Biden to unify the party.
My amateur surprise the night, Saturday night of the Nevada caucus was to try to calculate in my head the Latino impact for Senator Sanders, moving from what I gained as 39% out to 40, a big 40-something percent. Could Mr. Sanders get a Latino surprise tonight?
I think so. I think also, though, that's such a great point, Tom, because really what I have my eye on tonight are Texas and California.
Yes.
And the Hispanic vote in both of those states is going to be so incredibly important. Those are the 2 prizes tonight on Super Tuesday. And so should you have a situation where Sanders is able to win California as well as Texas, I think that would really inject even more momentum into his campaign. But I think from Biden's perspective, you have to look at where the party is, where the superdelegates are.
Right.
And that's a very difficult message to sow, especially to counter the Sanders movement.
Within the pundit media that last night was on full bore, as you can imagine, and Kevin, you're living it tick by tick. What I found fascinating is how really well experienced experts all turn back to turnout. Review the turnout that we've seen in those first 4 individual state primaries.
Well, you didn't really see much turnout in Iowa or even a strong boost in turnout in the other states. There was a slight uptick in some of them. But I think it's more, and this is where it's interesting, it's really fascinating to watch the arguments that the Biden campaign has made as well as the Sanders campaign has made. Because you've got Biden saying this is a fight for the soul of the country. You've got Sanders saying that there's a need for a political revolution. Those are 2 very different messages. And so one is saying we've got to change the rhetorical approach coming from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and reflect it around the world. And the other is saying, no, we need structural change. And so to see Buttigieg and Klobuchar immediately go to Biden at a time really when Sanders is going to need some type of showing that he is able to unify the party was quite striking.
Will Warren go to Biden?
I don't know. I think that's really what I want to know. I think that's it would be. They have an interesting history where they actually did work together when she was in a freshman senator and he was in the White House as vice president. They haven't really always had this frosty relationship prior to them getting in the race. I mean, he was a senator from Delaware, which of course, has a strong financial services sector. So they governed very differently as senators. But, I mean, could she be a vice presidential pick? I don't know. Could Klobuchar be a vice presidential pick? I don't know.
I want you to go to Texas. There's been so much written about California, and I've seen so little written about Texas. Kevin Cirilli, you're encyclopedic, for example, on Pennsylvania, where the Democratic moderates are, the Democratic conservatives, all 12 of them left in the country, and, of course, the expanding liberal progressive contingent as well. Does that mix, is that also true in Texas?
I think that's a really good point. I think in addition to the surging Hispanic population and also the booming city growth and the younger dynamics of cities like Dallas and Houston, which has been something that Democrats have wanted to change the red state into a Democrat state for quite some time, Tom. But I mean, in a general election, I don't see Texas going to Democrats. But in this dynamic, I mean, you saw Beto O'Rourke and the rise of him, but he still lost to Ted Cruz.
No, this has been wonderful. Good briefing, Kevin Cirilli. Thank you so much. And as we go to this really beginning of the campaign, according to so many experts, we say thank you to Kevin Cirilli for just incredible work nationwide. Futures up 8, Dow futures up 97. Let me do a complete data check here. Karen Moscow, of course, doing that in good times, in bad. And today is, I'm going to call it a relative good time, but more than anything, folks, what I see in the Bloomberg terminal is an oddity. I've got dollar stronger, yen 107.78, Euro 111.15. I'm going to call it a churn to the foreign exchange market. I should point out Swiss franc is in nicely against the euro. That's very important. We've seen a stronger Swiss franc over, I'm going to say 3 or 4 days as well. Futures again up 7, Dow futures up 95, and the VIX is really stunning. We are at 42-ish, and we've come in a solid 10 points, 33.88 on the VIX. To give that perspective, 20 is average. Anything above 30, anybody would explain has fear and stress in the market. And critically, we're still at that level, 33.81 on the VIX. Oil elevated 47.95, up $2.38. Please stay with us through the day, watching the Fed from a distance. Jobs Day on Friday. This is Bloomberg.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Your new neighbour is a musician. His creative peak is at 3 a.m. They're doing roadworks next to your house. A famous teen star moves onto your street. There's always a reason to travel. Fly with Lufthansa's incredible fares around the world to destinations like Nairobi, Cape Town, or Johannesburg. Book now on Lufthansa.com. Conditions apply. Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £14 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Switch to Sky Broadband Superfast. It's so reliable, we'll guarantee your speeds or money back. And for a short time only, it's just £25 a month for 18 months with a $19.95 setup fee. So stay connected with super reliable, super fast broadband at a super low price. Switch or recontract today. Search sky.com. Offer ends 12th of March. Prices may change during this period. Includes Sky Pay As You Talk. Sky Fibre areas only. Speeds vary by location. 1 month subscription refund if speeds drop below minimum download speed for 3 consecutive days. Claim twice in minimum term after first 14 days. See sky.com/guarantee.
Do you do the same thing every weekend? You know, meet up with the same friends for brunch, browse around the same shops, eat the same Saturday night takeaway. Mine's a lamb balti with mushroom pilau rice. Snuggle up next to the same person and watch the same brain-numbing reality TV. Then maybe it's time to switch it up. Starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Down the right side of the lane, stops at the elbow jumper, up and good! TuneIn is your destination for college basketball, and it's free. This week we have a must-hear game. North Carolina at Duke.
For the win! No! Tapped up by Moore! And in at the buzzer! Moore makes it in!
This Saturday, tip-off is at 6 p.m. Eastern. With college basketball and TuneIn, hear every call from games around the country live. Search college sports to listen free today. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
The first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
I think the U.S. is going in for a couple of years of very, very strong growth.
The deficit by early in the next decade will start to become a real problem for the markets.
Finance.
The consumer is really strong right now.
We don't realize how good times are now.
Investment.
The biggest problem that people have in investing in stocks is that they get out of the market.
It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. Paul Sweeney out today. He's voting in all 14 states. Super Tuesday for Paul Sweeney. Lisa Abramowitz pulled the short straw and is with us today in this 9 o'clock hour, getting ready for her dash to noon, as I believe she will do. Very importantly, John Tucker, thank you so much for this headline. Second coronavirus case confirmed in New York, and this north of New York City, Lisa, in Westchester.
Yeah, and it comes after more details come out about the New York City high school that was closed down as a result of a suspected coronavirus case that's in the Bronx. So also in northern New York City, but just sort of confirming the sense that it will spread. It is spreading. The question is, how controlled can it be?
Yeah, and I've said this hours ago here in our long surveillance day, and that the one little snippet headline, and I'll call it not a lead headline, a second headline, it was a 30-ary. It's like tertiary, but it's 30-ary headline. In the Washington Post saying 15 of 50 states, 15 of 50 states in some way are affected now by this virus.
Now, this is important to me. We're not seeing a massive reaction in futures right now, which I think is actually really compelling. You're actually seeing them tick a little bit higher. The reason why, there was a time when any coronavirus headline showing the spread of it would knock equities down. The fact that they're not is interesting. The question is, have we reached a point where that's being priced in, that we are going to see an ongoing spread?
The Bloomberg headline, G7 pledges to fight virus stops short of specific action. I know Dow Jones had what I was talking about, the phrase stand ready. They stand ready. And of course, the effect of that, and clearly talking to our Michael McKee doing all our international economic coverage, is every central bank now has permission to affect whatever accommodation they want. The good news for us, and this was futures up 13, Dow futures up 139, is always, Lisa, each and every day, David Wilson stands ready.
And his tie stands ready.
His tie is always standing ready. It's a very calculation tie as well. Do you stand ready with the airlines? Do you begin with the airlines today?
You've got to. I mean, because you're seeing them bounce back finally. Now, an S&P airline index did rise yesterday for the first time in 2.5 weeks. But you're really seeing the rebound pick up today. After the group kind of lagged behind the rally we saw in the broader market yesterday. You look at American, it's up 4.5%. Delta's up 5%. Southwest and United both higher by 3% in early trading. So, signs of a recovery there. And then there's Tesla, up 8%. The electric car maker's headed for $1,060 a share in the next 12 months. That's according to JMP Securities. The firm raised its rating to the equivalent of buy from hold, and data compiled by Bloomberg shows JMP is the only firm with a price target above $1,000. So 4 digits. That's what they're looking for.
That's got to be tough to do. I mean, with their China visibility, like Apple as well.
Well, you're not talking about a huge leap in the stock, though. I mean, as we speak, Tesla trading at $802 a share.
Yeah, well, we'll see. What else do you have today?
We've got Qiagen up 16%. The Dutch maker of tests for cancer, coronavirus, and other diseases accepted a $10 billion takeover offer from U.S.-based Thermo Fisher Scientific. The all-cash deal is the largest in the healthcare industry this year, and it's looking like a win-win so far. Thermo Fisher shares up 5% in early trading. HP higher by 0.5%. Xerox Holdings escalated a battle for control of the personal computer and printer maker by starting a tender offer. HP rejected a cash and stock proposal from Xerox that's valued at $35 billion. You got Advanced Micro Devices up 2.5%. The chip maker was raised the equivalent buy from neutral at Piper Sandler, which cited a recent drop in the stock. AMD fell as much as 25% from a high on February 19th. It's rebounded a bit the last couple of days. More to come, it would seem, based off of this call. You got some earnings to talk about. AutoZone, one of them, it's down 6.5%. Fiscal second quarter results showed the auto parts retailers' revenue missed the analyst average estimate in the Bloomberg survey for the first time in 4 quarters. Sales unexpectedly dropped at stores open more than a year. Target, basically little change at this point, higher by 0.5% last time I looked. Now, their fourth quarter earnings beat projections, but their sales came up short by the most in more than 7 years. So,
couple more.
I've only got one for you, Tom. Kohl's, it's up 3.5%. The department store owners' earnings for the fiscal fourth quarter beat analysts' highest estimate in sales were just above projections as well.
David Wilson standing ready on the equity markets as well. Are you standing ready as well, Lisa?
I'm standing ready on the credit markets. I feel like we have to mention this. Sherwin-Williams currency market in the investment grade world, a reopening that we're seeing, and there was actually an energy deal that got done in the high yield bond market yesterday. So to the extent that the credit markets were frozen, they're starting to soften up a little bit.
Are you painting this weekend?
I'm painting every single wall.
Are you going to paint frozen blue with Sherwin-Williams? I'm sure they have that color out there.
Let it go, Tom.
Yeah, I'm letting it go right now because it didn't work. Okay, like many of my jokes. Yesterday, I did something different. I put out, knowing it would have a big response, an 8-page essay by one Greg Giroux. He's with Bloomberg Government. And he just stopped me cold yesterday. President this, candidate that. And Giroux put out a spectacular 8-page compendium of the congressional races that are out there. I put it out. I heard Greg Giroux from any number of full-time political pundits saying they were blown away by the thoroughness of your report. Let me cut to what matters, linking in Super Tuesday, and that's the great purpleness of Texas as well. In your wonderful study below the presidential candidates, what did you learn about the Latino vote? What did you learn about the dynamics of Republican Texas?
Well, the Latino vote is one of the reasons why Texas is becoming less Republican red and more purple. We'll have to wait and see whether that plays out in November. But you've got some important races where the Latino vote will be very influential, including a district in South Texas, Laredo, some San Antonio suburbs, where you have a rare, moderate, so-called blue dog Democrat, anti-abortion, pro-Chamber of Commerce, who is being opposed by his former intern, a young immigration lawyer who's trying to unseat him in the Democratic primary, and who says that that district, which leans Democratic, ought to have someone with a more liberal or progressive voting record.
So, Greg, given the fact that Texas is taking on new import for the Democratic Party, what are you looking for in terms of Super Tuesday?
Well, I'll be looking at the overall turnout in the state. You have to be a little bit careful there because you can't really often extrapolate turnout in primaries and ahead to the November election. But for Texas, for Democrats, if they're going to try and put Texas in play, they need to register a lot more Latino voters because they tend to be younger, they tend to have lower rates of citizenship, lower rates of voter registration and participation. And if they're able to marry that with, say, their continued strength in, or at least continued inroads in some traditionally Republican suburbs in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston, which they did in 2016, they could make Texas close. It wasn't a narrow win for Donald Trump in 2016. He won Texas by 9 points, but that's a little bit lower than the typical margins for Republicans in Texas. I still think the state leans Republican, but it's getting more competitive.
What about in Alabama, in California? What are you looking for in some other states?
Well, in Alabama, you have former Senator Jeff Sessions, who was President Trump's first attorney general, trying to reclaim the seat that's now held by a Democrat, Doug Jones. And what's interesting there is that Sessions probably won't win the primary outright today. He probably will be forced into a runoff election in 4 weeks because he won't get a majority of the vote, which is really interesting because he's been dominant in that state. But he did have a deteriorating relationship with Donald Trump, which played out in public, and that's one reason why Sessions does not have the strongest standing among Republican voters as he once did.
If you're just joining us, he is our best at the congressional analysis. Greg Giroux with us with a terrific report out yesterday. I'll try to throw that out on social again here in a bit, as I did yesterday. Greg, when you hear people say that Bernie Sanders is up against the establishment, how does that play in Congress?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how, say, the vote for Joe Biden and for Bernie Sanders kind of track with, say, more quote-unquote establishment or more moderate, and those terms are imperfect, of course, how those votes track down ballot with candidates who are kind of aligning themselves with Biden and Sanders. One thing that this Super Tuesday is going to do is it's going to increase voter turnout in these congressional races beyond what they normally would get. It'll be interesting to see all these people who vote for president, that's sucking up all the oxygen in the room. What do they do down ballot? Do all the Bernie voters, for example, do they vote for more liberal candidates for Congress, and do Biden voters vote for, say, so-called more moderate, traditional Democratic candidates for Congress?
Greg Giroux with us to finish up here. I do want to point out that Governor Cuomo is somewhat scheduled to speak. We see on our internal feed here, stand by for a live announcement from the governor of the state of New York, and this is again off of virus, a second case in Westchester. Why don't we do this, Lisa, just to keep us going and get Greg Giroux onto his Super Tuesday day. Greg Giroux, thank you so much for joining us this morning. With the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, thank you very much. As you mentioned, there is a second case of coronavirus that has been reported in New York. And a New York City high school is closed today after a suspected case of coronavirus in its community. A statement from SAR Academy and High School says that the step is a precautionary measure which is following city guidelines. According to the statement, it urges people to remain calm. It comes as the Trump administration announced new procedures to screen international travelers for the COVID-19 virus. In the U.S., there are now at least 105 cases across 13 states. The death toll is now at 6. In all are from Washington State. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, says researchers are working on a vaccine, but the process takes time.
The vaccine, with regard to initial testing for safety, will likely do that within the next month and a half, 6 weeks or so.
Dr. Fauci says safety testing can take 4 months, followed by at least 6 months of further tests. It is Super Tuesday when voters in 14 states are casting ballots for Democratic presidential candidates. Former Vice President Joe Biden has the endorsement from Pete Buttigieg, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rourke, who all recently dropped out of the race. O'Rourke spoke last night in Dallas.
Tomorrow, March 3rd, 2020, I will be casting my ballot for Joe Biden.
In the Nashville area, at least 2 tornadoes roared through early this morning, killing at least 7 people. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Lisa, Tom.
And Michael, thanks so much. Futures up 13. Lisa, I'm looking at dollar, and this is called riding a rail, where the dollar goes up as it did near 100 on DXY. That's up 2 standard deviations. And then it goes negative 2 standard deviations. That's a 4 standard deviation move, and the dollar index weaker from that lofty level on down to where we are right now.
Yeah, a lot of whippy action. One place, though, where we have not seen whippy price action has been gold. And I think that this is important after the G7 announcement, where basically they said they're going to coordinate and have timely response in order to support strong growth going ahead. Gold continuing to be bid, currently $1,603 an ounce. I'm just looking at that and I'm thinking, you know what? This to me suggests that people do think there'll be some sort of debasement to sort of currencies and some sort of sense going forward that perhaps if you want to retain value, gold still is a decent bet.
I love how that's really true. $1,604 the ounce on gold. Up $9 today. Futures up 13. Dow futures up 140. Don't forget, our coverage of Super Tuesday. We'll look forward to that tonight.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
How do you make the most understated Range Rover even more striking? Paint it Santorini black, fit it with privacy glass, a full leather ebony interior, Then place it on 21-inch gloss black alloy wheels. The Range Rover Velar R Dynamic Black, understated, has rarely been so bold. Limited numbers available for a limited price. Search Range Rover Velar, Land Rover, above and beyond.
Limited availability while stocks last at participating UK Land Rover retailers. Check with your local retailer.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. And U.S. stock index futures are now moving higher again. Treasuries are advancing. This after a group of 7 finance ministers said they were ready to combat the impact of the coronavirus. However, they held off on any action for now. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 21 points. Dow futures up 207. NASDAQ futures up 88. The DAX in Germany's up 2.5%. 10-year Treasury up 8/30 seconds. Yield 1.13%. Yield on the 2-year 0.87%, and the 30-year yield 1.69%. NYMEX crude oil up 2.3% or $1.07 to $47.81 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.6% or $9.40 at $16.0420 an ounce. The euro 1.1120 against the dollar. British pound 1.2794, and the yen at 107.83. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much. Lisa Bramowitz and Tom Keene. Paul Sweeney off. He's visiting all 14 states at Super Tuesday. We're thrilled that Paul's doing that team coverage here on Super Tuesday. Look, tonight, Kevin Cirilli will be particularly strong on what we see in the trends, and there'll be a couple key themes out of Super Tuesday that will be important. Futures lift up 15, now up 21, and the VIX 33.65. Yields pretty much stasis here. 1.13 on the 10-year yield. For those just catching up with the day, G7 comes out and stands ready. Pretty flat statement is taken by many, but everybody I've talked to says it doesn't preclude any kind of emergency action. And Lisa, what we see in New York here just in the last hour on the virus is tangible.
Well, what we're seeing is another confirmed case in the New York City suburb of Westchester County. A man who had a history of a respiratory illness, being hospitalized. The key thing, I think, to watch from a market perspective is that you saw equity futures go higher after this was reported. I think that this is a massive shift in sentiment from when any coronavirus headline sunk equities, period, full stop.
Joining us now, Lisa, and this is very important, and it gets very emotional. We have Mr. Soma. Taylor Riggs is with us, who's been out in San Francisco. Did you decide to live? Were you on Nob Hill or Pacific Heights? Where did you?
I was in Nob Hill, across from the Fairmont and the Mark Hopkins.
The heritage of the Mark Hopkins is extraordinary. I mean, you go back to World War II, and that's where everybody went for their final drink. As a lot of brave people went across the Pacific to Hawaii, and beyond, and there is that heritage. And then to all of our listeners nationwide, there's the new turmoil of San Francisco. Give us a little vignette in your time out there, leading our tech coverage, I should say, for all of Bloomberg Media. And I thought you just killed it on that on a day-to-day basis. Great. But give us the vignette, the thing that surprised you most of weeks on end in San Francisco.
I think what surprised me the most, and I'm being brutally honest here, big tech doesn't care about what's going on in Washington or New York. They are continuing as usual. They made more acquisitions when I was there than I've never seen. I think here in New York, it's so easy to say, oh, there's antitrust, oh, there's regulation. Tech doesn't care.
I mean, Bloomberg 960, the Bay Area has to deal with the fact that New York's far, far away. Is it? How far away is New York for the people of San Francisco right now, and particularly the moneyed set that we talk to?
Yeah, I think every tech executive that I spoke to sort of, on background, off the record, said the only reason they were in New York is because that's where the bankers are. That's where the capital is. Otherwise,
where the Bloomberg terminals
it's where the terminals are. Yeah. Otherwise, they want to be in San Francisco. That sort of really is. And I was surprised because so often we hear about big tech and being global, and they are, not pretending, on the outside, of course, taking all of the antitrust and deregulation threats very seriously. But behind the scenes, it is business as usual. And the sell-off, it comes and goes. Amazon and Microsoft, huge big cap companies, the sell-off affects them. But really business as usual.
Right. Business as usual from a regulatory standpoint. But I'd be curious to know on the coronavirus and supply chain standpoint, we've heard some IPOs being potentially delayed. There's a question about debt offerings. How much of a chill has that cast over Silicon Valley?
I think the big issue is when we take a look at the coronavirus, yes, it impacts the IPOs. But the IPO issue was a lot about valuations. I think WeWork, right? So overvalued, so worried about what tons of private capital was doing to the valuations that really made people rethink when they were coming to public markets about valuations and their corporate governance. Now that perhaps maybe a sell-off and the valuations have come down, people actually are feeling maybe a little bit better about reinvesting. As we take a look at the coronavirus, Apple and Tesla are the two that I'm watching for. Apple, as we know, big bellwether sentiment gauge to China. Tesla's been killing it in China, and I'm really curious to see how that Shanghai factory responds to a coronavirus.
One final question. I saw in San Francisco 17% increase in homeless by the count that they do.
Huge.
This is a couple years ago. Give us just an anecdote of it. To me, it's not that it's depression level, that's inaccurate, but the tenderloin and the tense out and all that it has a tinge of the 1930s.
The Tenderloin is a block away from Nob Hill. That's how scary that is. You're on Jones in California, which is where I'm living. You go one block east to Hyde and you make a left and you're in the Tenderloin and you walk down and it is so sad. They've porta potties on the streets. It is like the zombie apocalypse. You're walking down and these people have been pushed out. They've nowhere to go. They have their rights, so they're not being pulled off the streets. They are there. I ended up walking down the middle of the road with the traffic because it's safer than being on the sidewalk. It's sad. It's so sad.
What's the decay time, Lisa, when she loses her California accent? Is it like days or weeks, or could this be permanent?
I think probably we're going to be talking about more days, I would
more
say.
Permanent than the California blonde, I guess.
Well, we'll see on that as well. Taylor Riggs, we are thrilled to have you back, and you'll look for her reporting not only on technology but much else as well. Futures up 25. Taylor Riggs lifting the market single-handedly here. The Dow up 257. I need to give you those levels. We're near 3,100 on SPX, 3,091 on the Standard & Poor's 500. The Dow, 26,737. And the VIX in 10 big figures somewhere it was. I don't know the chart up. Don't quote me on that, but in 10 big figures, 33.65. And to be clear, that is still an elevated volatility index with what we've seen over the last number of days. Yields come in, Lisa, as well. You were mentioning Sherwood-Williams in the bond market as well. So are you telling me we've got normalcy within bonds back again?
The question is, are we getting enough visibility into at least central bank and policymaker support that companies feel confident enough to go out and issue bonds? I don't think that it's fair to say all clear. That said, people are looking for a window to come to market. We're looking at all-time low record borrowing costs for investment-grade companies. You've got to imagine that these companies want to take advantage of it.
Got to step in, absolutely.
And meanwhile, honestly, oil prices rising 2%. I think this is also a big deal, given the fact that OPEC Plus seems to be also willing to come in with more cuts.
I note Honeywell International with a piece in Europe as well that they launched today, an issue today, I should say, as well. We're up 25 points on the Standard & Poor's 500. Please stay with us. We've got to get the market open. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Mayday, Mayday, this is Red Dwarf. Our engines are dead and we're being sucked into a black hole. Can anyone hear me? Over?
The only thing that's over is us, Crichton. We're finished.
Guys, relax. I've got Smart Breakdown with the AA. It sends them your vehicle's fault data, so they should know what's wrong before they even get here.
I don't believe it.
What, that they'll already know what's wrong?
No, that you're actually capable of something useful.
The future of breakdown today. The AA. Drive smart. See theaa.com for details.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres. Ends 18th of March.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hi, good morning. I'm Karen Moscow along with Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz. And the opening bell is brought to you by SEI, built on advanced technologies and 50 years of innovation. SEI offers asset managers a comprehensive and flexible operations outsourcing platform. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. Stocks are little changed at the open. The S&P 500 down a point at 3087. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 5 at 26,701. And the NASDAQ is up 2 at 8953. 10-year Treasury up 930 seconds, yield 1.13%. And the yield on the 2-year, 0.87%. NYMEX crude oil up 2% or 91 cents at 47.65 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.6% or $9 at 16.0370 an ounce. The euro 1.1122 against the dollar. The yen at 107.81. Tom and Lisa.
Karen, thank you so much. We spoke with Liz Ann Saunders, who is outstanding on flows and what people are doing with their money, and she briefed us on the money walking out of equity ETFs. She did mention some of it seems to be tilting to an international purchase, but very, very informative. We'd like to drive forward the next 30 minutes of conversation and can do that with Barry Ritholtz. He has a modest podcast out that is better than good. We'll try to talk about that in this half hour. And of course, working for Bloomberg Opinion and writing important essays, and far more working with people in his own at Ritholtz Bear Market Management, as it's called, as well. Barry, let me cut to the chase. We've had a good old all-American crisis. We had a correction. We almost got to a bear market. We've come back as well. What did your clients do? Not what you told them to do. What did they actually do?
So, I'm fond of saying the time to read the emergency booklet in the seat back in front of you is not at 20,000 feet when the engine falls off. It's when you're bored sitting on the tarmac with nothing better to do. We take pride in educating our clients and making sure they know that these sort of things are a feature, not a bug, of the stock market. Stocks go up and down, sometimes violently, and we got one phone call and a couple of emails, but for the most part, everybody is looking through the coronavirus, through the 2020 elections, through the recession of 20 whenever, and thinking about money that they need in 10, 15, 20 years. Our clients aren't traders, they're investors.
Why did we go down if intelligent people are looking through this because they know viruses end?
Well, the fascinating thing about the stock market, it's not a matter of smart or dumb or intelligent or ignorant. It's people have different goals and there are different players in the marketplace. Some people are hedging other exposure. If you're in the travel business, you're probably concerned and you're hedging that exposure. Other people are traders. And so when you have investors and traders and speculators and hedgers all in the same market, you have people with very, very different objectives and very different timelines. Timelines. The market is going to respond short-term to the traders and long-term to the investors.
And I think that this is an important point. I do think, though, regardless of your timeline, there is one uniting factor right now as yields go to record lows, and that is how much more do longer-term returns have to decline, sort of bringing forward growth now and bringing forward returns now in favor of depressing those in the future, and how much do you really consider that?
So I have a very, very specific answer to that. I get that question all the time. Where are bond yields going to go? And my deeply informed, well-researched answer is, I haven't the slightest idea.
Hold on a second. It's not just about where bond yields will go. If they don't go up materially, it's hard to imagine how we can be in a situation with massive returns, either driven by bond price going up, yields going even lower, and on the relative valuation side, if profits don't pick up, that makes the argument for low rates. If they do, you could see how returns on the stock side also go down.
So I'll give you a practical answer and then an academic answer. The practical answer is, I've heard similar arguments at just about every 100 basis points, I don't know, for the past 25 years. Listen, rates can't go below 6%. What are we going to, we have inflation and big deficits. How can the 10-year drop below 5%, 4%, 3%? We've heard that argument. One day it'll be right. But the academic argument is effectively, we have not the slightest idea how this whole machinery works. We've been hearing for decades that deficits cause inflation. Apparently not. We've been hearing that the Fed has the ability to improve hiring and manage inflation. I don't see any proof that they have the ability to do that. Look, the beauty of free market capitalism is that money will go to where it's treated best in the market, and so we see those flows. It's not perfect. Sometimes money goes to where it's been mistreated. Just ask anybody you put money with SoftBank or WeWork or whatever. But the bottom line is, when you're looking at the overall economy and you're trying to guess what is the state of the market going to be if this turns out to be a pandemic, how is it going to affect future profits and revenues, no one really knows. There's just too much variables.
Right.
And so rather than guess, we say, own a broadly diversified portfolio that's guaranteed to underperform the S&P, but it'll cushion you in weeks like last week.
I want to have a moment of silence and primal scream for the wonderful Gary Schilling, who once again has been totally right about price up, yield down. Okay,
please don't do a primal scream.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, forget about the equity markets, Barry. Talk about bonds. If bond prices go up to a Gary Schilling level with low yields, what do you do within some kind of 50-year-old's balanced portfolio? Do you go to 1 month paper? Do you go to cash? Do you hedge? Bet against your own portfolio and use yield? What do you do?
Hedging is very expensive.
Yes,
it should be left. It should be left to people who want to play that game. The average investor doesn't need to take out insurance on their insurance.
Totally agree.
Because effectively, what bonds are in a balanced portfolio
is insurance.
It's your cushion. Listen, you know what? Cushion. Everybody should be in a 3x leveraged S&P 500 fund, except for the fact that they would lose their minds. They would be unable to deal with it. Real humans need to have something to offset the volatility of weeks like last week. So if you're in a 60-40 portfolio, and it's a mix of treasuries and high-quality corporates and munis.
You're saying even where bonds are priced, stay with a 40%.
I mean, muni bonds have as do many of the corporates and treasuries. There's a date certain where you turn those bonds in and replace them with something new. You have much more interest rate risk than you do capital loss risk.
Right. I want to point out markets reverse. We had some green on the screen and now negative 220 on the Dow. The VIX turns around. It's up a stick off of where we were last data check, at least a 34.33.
Well, that's where I wanted to go. This idea that we saw gains of as much as 1% ahead of the market open and then immediately reversed with those losses deepening near session lows. Honestly, I'm looking at this and I'm trying to understand, is this disappointment to the G7 statement? Is this a feeling of not knowing how to price the ongoing coronavirus and the spread of it apparently in New York State? I'm wondering, Barry, I understand your argument for longer term investing. Does that mean you don't pay attention to the day-to-day moves?
Well, I do because I'm in this business.
Okay.
But I had a very interesting experience last week. I'm on vacation. And
sounds interesting.
When you're on vacation and you bring your spouse, you can't have your face in a Bloomberg all day. You can't be checking stock prices all day. Not if happy wife, happy life. If you want to continue along that way. So I had the unusual experience after 30 years in this business of 25 some plus years of experiencing a market dislocation the way average investors do, the way the clients do. And so you wake up in the morning and you get ready to go out and have breakfast and go to the beach, and you have the television on for a few minutes, and it's like, wow, look at those futures. And then you hear a couple of explanations and you flick around to a couple of channels, and then you get to the beach and you sit there and you start thinking to yourself, is this what people are living through every day? This would scare the bejesus out of me if I didn't know that much of what is being said is so ephemeral and superficial and, to quote Howard Marks, not second-level thinking. And that's a really significant... I worked my way through a ton of channels just to experience what was there. It was genuinely frightening. It's not surprising people sold until last week.
Not to add to that, but to bring you some more headlines just crossing. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has been speaking and did confirm the second New York COVID-19 patient who lives in Westchester. He said he worked in New York City. Unclear what connection he had to the 39-year-old woman in Manhattan who had previously been confirmed. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is speaking in Washington, D.C., talking about how the U.S. is trying to work to get out test kits and that the coronavirus is coming at a time of a very resilient economy in the U.S.
Barry, what do you...
Resilient economy, test kits. Do you blame people for panicking in response to that sort of incompetent nonsense? Test kits should have been distributed to major medical centers and hospitals weeks and weeks and weeks ago. So the big problem, and I know this is an election year and I'm not trying to be political,
but you will.
China has been much more aggressive late stage. They did the same thing in the beginning. They basically blew it off and didn't take it seriously. We're repeating Now we're starting to get nervous, but we had a couple of months where we could have really stepped on the accelerator, and we didn't. And you end up with a week like last week in part response.
Barry, John emails in. Should he buy Apple here this morning?
I don't know. I don't know who he is and what his risk tolerance are and all that stuff. I think Apple's a great company. I'd rather buy it cheaper than more expensive, but people have been saying that. People have said that for 10 years, have rued not making the purchase.
Barry Ritholtz, thank you so much. Look for him on Bloomberg Opinion as well. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Lisa, Tom, thank you very much. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo confirmed a second case of the coronavirus in the state. This one is a man in his 50s in Westchester County, just outside of New York City. On Sunday, officials said a 39-year-old woman in Manhattan has the virus. Meanwhile, Vice President Mike Pence visited a Florida school last Friday where a student has been quarantined after his mother came into contact with a coronavirus patient. At least 105 cases have been reported across 13 states in the U.S. 6 people have died, all from Washington State. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, says expanded virus testing will help reveal the source of the community spread infections.
People are going to get the kind of screening where they may come in with a respiratory illness, and if they don't have the flu, test them and see. And if you do that, you may get a feel if there are people under the radar who are there in the community who do have coronavirus.
3 Democrats who've dropped out of the race for the White House now support Joe Biden's candidacy. Pete Buttigieg, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rourke endorsed Biden. Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth shared why she is endorsing Biden for president.
I just want someone who is going to unite our country and get back to work for working families all across this, Illinois and all across our nation. And Joe is the guy who's going to do that.
The endorsement comes ahead of today's Super Tuesday contest in 14 states. Tornadoes ripped across Tennessee early this morning, killing at least 7 people. One twister hit downtown Nashville, collapsing about 40 buildings around the city. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Lisa?
Michael Barr, thank you so much. I was pausing there, Lisa. I'm new here, so I had to find out where the button is.
It's the blue one.
The blue button
you
there.
push it.
O-N on it. Negative 200 now, negative 106. So a little better tape in the last 10 minutes. We're really going to give you more data checks here. It's not the uproar of the last number of days, but still watching markets carefully. The 10-year yield 1.12%. This
Bloomberg Pursuit's look at luxury. The markets may be in flux, but at least one alternative asset seems to be holding strong. Blue chip artwork. A Mark Rothko painting from the estate of late financier Donald Marin sold for about $70 million. According to people familiar with the private transaction, 3 New York galleries, Pace, Gagosian, and Aquavella, recently announced they joined forces to sell the former Museum of Modern Art trustees' trove. About $300 million worth has been placed so far, led by a pair of Picasso portraits sold to casino mogul Steve Wynn. Sports investors also doing well. Owners of the Los Angeles Football Club have partially bought out a stake held by Malaysian businessman Vincent Tan, in a deal that values the club at more than $700 million, the most ever for a Major League Soccer team. The LAFC deal continues a rapid uptick in team valuations for MLS, which starts its 25th season this weekend. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Your new neighbour is a musician. His creative peak is at 3 a.m. They're doing roadworks next to your house. A famous teen star moves onto your street. There's always a reason to travel. Fly with Lufthansa's incredible fares around the world to destinations like Nairobi, Cape Town, or Johannesburg. Book now on Lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Set for Life is the game from the National Lottery where you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. So go smash this month, next month, and make every month amazing. Play Set for Life Mondays and Thursdays.
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres. Ends 18th of March.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and stocks are lower. Treasuries are advancing after a group of 7 finance ministers pledged to combat the economic fallout from the spreading of the coronavirus, but stopped short of taking any immediate action. Meanwhile, Charles Schwab chief investment strategist Liz Ann Saunders told us the virus concerns are casting a big shadow on corporate earnings.
I think what's troubling is that companies are simply withdrawing guidance. They're not lowering guidance. So analysts are stymied because the companies don't know what to say about guidance. We know numbers are too high at this point. They just don't know where to take them.
And Liz Ann Saunders has heard earlier on Bloomberg Surveillance. Right now, the S&P 500 is down 0.6% or 19 points. It's at 3070. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.6% on 164 at 26,541. And the Nasdaq is down 0.6% or 54 points at 8897. 10-year Treasury up 12/30 seconds, yield 1.12%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.87%. NYMEX crude oil's up 2% or 93 cents at 47.68 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.6% or 85 cents at 150. Nope, that's the wrong one. COMEX gold is up 0.7%. I'm going to fix that now. It's up $10.70 at $16.0550 an ounce. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Lisa.
Thank you so much, Karen. Right now, we are looking at markets that are selling off after initially being up ahead of the open. Meanwhile, we have New York City confirming the second case. New York State, I should say. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo coming out, confirming a Westchester County man has tested positive for the coronavirus, which raises a question what this means about the spread, because it's unclear where he contracted it. And Tom, we're so lucky to have Max Neeson with us, Bloomberg opinion columnist here, to really put this into perspective. As we read these headlines, what's the perspective we should read them in?
So I think the thing to keep in mind is that this likely indicates that there is some degree of community spread in the United States. That shouldn't be a particularly big surprise to anybody, just given, how the disease is appearing in the rest of the world. The fact that until recently, testing capacity and the spectrum of people who were testing in New York and elsewhere in the country was extremely limited. So if there were cases coming from elsewhere, from anywhere outside of China, we just weren't catching them. That means, just given the fact that this can be quite virulent, we are going to see more cases coming in the days and weeks to come as we finally start to ramp up testing capacity.
Where are we in terms of developing some sort of remedy, some sort of vaccine? Any progress on that?
It's likely to be a fairly slow process, unfortunately. The nearest term thing that we might get is a previously developed Gilead drug called remdesivir. We might get the earliest data from China in April, but it's going to be a while to come before that's at production scale and confirmed to be effective.
Max, we got to be quick here with the news flow that we have. On the virus right now, I want you to talk to the people listening. They've got kids in school. They're running their lives right now, and they know they're not supposed to be in a panic about a virus 7 high schools away. But what's the but right now for the general public?
The but right now is that there likely are people in the community that have this virus right now. And the only thing you can do as a person is be careful, wash your hands, avoid touching your face. If you're sick, stay home. It sounds simple, but that's where the tenor you should take right now.
Max Neeson, thank you so much. And we greatly appreciate your coverage on this for all of Bloomberg and Bloomberg Opinion. Max Neeson writing up on, with a great authority, and this is something we've tried to do is dovetail his expertise, Mr. Neeson's expertise with all of the different medical professionals we've done on Bloomberg Surveillance. This is the first day in ages where we really haven't talked to a world-class virologist or medical professional about what we see, but nevertheless, there it is. Let me give you a data check right now and frame these markets. And of course, the G7 meeting 2 and 3 hours ago, stand ready seemed to be the phrase there, but we came out of it. And thank you to our Michael McKee for his perspective on G7. We've got red on the screen, negative 200 on the Dow, the VIX 33.62, and yields come in. We're in a good 4 basis points now on the 10-year yield, 1.12%. We'll see where that heads. And also, I would point out dollar fractionally stronger as well, with the yen 107.68 and euro 111.20. So there's a churn to the market as well. Lisa, what have you seen in the credit markets today?
Well, before we go to credit, I just think that there is a complete lack of conviction when you look at equities, right? I mean, we saw them up ahead of the open and now near their session lows. In the bond market, there's a lot more conviction. Yields lower, period, the end. You have currently priced into the Fed funds futures market almost 4 rate cuts by year end, with an increasing number of traders betting that the Fed will cut before the March 18th meeting. That is actually becoming a more common bet out there. Some people betting that the Fed will cut by 50 basis points at their March 18th meeting. You know, raising a question again, is this the correct response to something that is a profoundly economic issue? And regardless, how important it is to keep equity valuations afloat at a time when people have pointed to that for some of the confidence we're seeing among the consumer.
What you bring up is really important, Lisa, and that, folks, and this goes back to other crises we've had. I have the clearest memories of 1987, which was another time. You need to remember that in 1987, there weren't Bloomberg terminals. You had a Bunker Ramo or a Tele mental block. Lisa, it was a different time and place. But what's so different now in all this, and with this Fed analysis, the parlor game of it, is information moves so fast. I mean, information just flies.
It does fly. I will say there has been one consistent drumbeat, and that is yields are going to go lower, and the Fed's going to drop rates possibly by 100 basis points by year end. That is what the market is saying consistently, despite any movement that we're seeing in equities.
You're willing to say the market consensus is 100 basis points now?
Right now, I'm looking at Fed funds futures. They're pricing in 3.9 rate cuts by the end of January, 3.8 rate cuts by the end of December. So yes, that is consensus.
The terminal function, Lisa Hester, that they won't let me have, it's too dangerous.
It's WIRT.
You have to be an adult to use that.
I will say, I did speak with our data folk, and they said that it is a little bit skewed right now because the current implied overnight rate is lower than where it currently is, based on the fact that an increasing number of people are betting on a rate cut ahead of the March 18th meeting.
Negative 307 on the Dow, some deterioration in the tape here. We'll have much more through you and extra data checks. And, of course, keeping our eyes on all the different announcements that you could see within government and on the street as well. Again, negative 308 on the Dow. The VIX comes up a full stick now, 34.31 as well. I want to set out our Super Tuesday coverage. We've been with the market gyrations and G7 meeting. Maybe we did a little less on Super Tuesday than we would have done. Our Kevin Cirilli and David Weston London. We'll be providing a lot of coverage there and perspective on 14 states. And as we heard from Terry Haynes, good morning, with Pangea and with others through the last 2 or 3 days, the real clear thing I've heard is, you know what, folks? Look at Texas and look at California. You'll learn a lot, particularly about the strength of a senator from Vermont. Again, negative 267 on the Dow. We're looking at dollar strength right now. That benchmark yen, safe haven 107.67, fractionally weaker yen. We are produced in New York by Richard Truman. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, I'll try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
On average, in London, a scooter or motorbike is stolen every hour. Make sure it's not yours. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10. If you lose on the first...